Chapter 271. It was raining. It was really raining. It was about the same time as Xiao Xian had predicted, only a few seconds apart. Was it a coincidence? Or was it really the same as what the knot had predicted? After washing the bird droppings off his hands with the rainwater, Xiao Xian walked back into the cave. He took out the straw rope from the animal skin bag and cut it again. Looking at the curtain of rain outside the cave, he wondered if he should try again. It was already raining, so what was the point of divination for the next one? Why don't I try when the rain will stop? Xiao Xian recalled the state he was in when he was tying the rope and his thoughts when he was tying the rope. Then he picked up the rope, closed his eyes, and threw away all distracting thoughts. He thought about when the rain would stop. Waiting for the hands to reappear in his mind, Xiao Xian observed for a while. He found that the nodding movements of the hands were different from the chaotic knots in the past. There was hope. Xiao Xian carefully observed the movements of the hands. In his own hands, the straw rope was knotted in the same way. When Xiao Xian left the state of consciousness, the feeling of exhaustion hit him again. His vision went dark for a moment, and his head hurt. It took a while for him to recover. It seemed that this method of knot divination was indeed very exhausting. Looking at the new conclusion in his hands, Xiao Xian interpreted it. He found that this time it was not as detailed as before. The meaning was somewhat vague, but he could roughly guess. The rain would stop before noon. Even if there was no sun, Xiao Xian could roughly guess the time. He was used to days without clocks. Even if the sky was covered with dark clouds, he could guess the time by looking at the sky. This was a necessary skill for hunting in the mountains. It was only noon, so he would wait and see. Xiao Xian put the knot aside and ate a piece of cold and hard barbecue meat. He leaned against the cave wall to rest and recover his strength as soon as possible. When Xiao Xian felt that it was about time, the sound of the rain outside the cave had lessened, but it did not stop. Walking to the entrance of the cave, Xiao Xian looked outside. The thick clouds in the sky were dispersing, and Yangguang shone through the gaps between the clouds, illuminating the forest full of vitality. The sound of the rain gradually lessened until it completely stopped. In the sky, the dark clouds dispersed. Yangguang was just in time. Once was a coincidence, and twice was also a coincidence? Xiao Xian was even more convinced that the inheritance recorded on the longevity leaf was not divination. Xiao Xian rarely saw such a method ever since knots were gradually replaced. Even when he was on a long journey, he had never seen such a method. He didn't expect to obtain such a thing. The only thing he didn't know was which shaman from which tribe had left this behind. There wasn't even a trace of the tribe's totem. After the rain, the sky cleared. Cha-Cha flew out and caught a small ferocious beast. She then shared it with Xiao Xian. After eating, Cha-Cha rested beside him, while Xiao Xian stayed in the cave. He had almost recovered his strength. Looking at the remaining straw ropes in the animal skin bag, he thought for a while and cut off another section with his stone knife. Not in a hurry to leave, Xiao Xian planned to try the knots for the third time. He had finally succeeded, so he wanted to study it more. He wanted to predict what he might encounter next, but the third time was not so smooth. He still tied the knots to his fingers. Again. Failure. Again. Again. Failure again. Half of the straw ropes in the animal skin bag had been used up. Xiao Xian put down the knots in his hands and leaned against the wall to rest. Why did he fail? Was it too difficult? Cha-Cha was beside him, watching Xiao Xian make straw balls one after another. Then he leaned against the wall and banged his head against it. It didn't quite understand Xiao Xian's thoughts. It only felt that humans were really complicated animals. After his strength recovered, Xiao Xian thought that maybe the divination just now was too difficult. He couldn't do it, so he decided to do something easier. If he couldn't even do something easy, then he wouldn't try again today. He couldn't force it. Maybe it was a problem with his condition. He would try again when he was in a better condition. Picking up another section of straw rope, Xiao Xian thought about where he should go next. When the knots were finally done, Xiao Xian breathed a sigh of relief. Was the previous one still too difficult? He would have succeeded if he changed to something easier. He shouldn't bite off more than he could chew. It was better to take it step by step. The next place to go was naturally the place where Cha-Cha told him about the stone. This wasn't too difficult. However, when Xiao Xian deciphered the meaning of the knot and compared it with the direction given by Cha-Cha, he found that the two directions were not the same. The knot was successful, so it shouldn't be done randomly. Then, was the direction given by the divination more meaningful to Xiao Xian? In order to figure it out, Xiao Xian made some adjustments and tried again with another section of straw rope. The result was the same as before. Xiao Xian looked at the direction indicated by the knot and pondered. What was more important than the stone there? After thinking for a while, Xiao Xian made a decision. Cha-cha, let's not look for the stone first. Let's go there. Xiao Xian pointed in a different direction. Cha-cha had never been to the direction pointed by Xiao Xian, but it didn't matter. It was quite excited to go to an unfamiliar forest. Because the knot had consumed a lot of energy and time, Xiao Xian decided to set off tomorrow. At the same time, he took some time out of the cave to find some suitable vines to use as rope, in case he didn't have enough straw rope. He had used so much straw rope to tie the knot, so he had to prepare some more in case of an emergency. The next day, Xiao Xian, who had recovered, left the cave with Cha-cha and headed in the direction indicated by the knot. There was a river flowing through the forest. The river water was a little green, and there were some animals moving around occasionally. Xiao Xian didn't walk by the river. It was dangerous there. He was at least 20 to 30 meters away from the river. There were some shiny things on the gravel beach by the river. Xiao Xian wanted to pick one up to take a look. However, when he bent down to pick it up, he suddenly heard a whistling sound. Xiao Xian had been on guard against his surroundings. When he heard the sound, he turned his body and dodged to the side. Bang! Where Xiao Xian was standing, a water arrow passed through and hit a big rock, splashing water everywhere. Water arrow? Xiao Xian's eyelids twitched. Where did this water arrow come from? Was it a fish by the river? Before Xiao Xian could think, another water arrow shot out from the river. Although it was made of water, it was strong and fast. Xiao Xian dodged the second water arrow. It hit a tree about 50 meters away from the river bank, leaving a hole in the trunk. Following that, the third and fourth water arrows chased after Xiao Xian. However, because of these continuous arrows, Xiao Xian also saw the source of the water arrows. It was indeed from the river. There was a bulge floating on the surface of the river. It was part of some kind of creature in the water. Xiao Xian didn't want to waste any more time here. After dodging the water arrows, he left the river bank. The deeper he went into the forest, the more he couldn't underestimate even a fish in the river. Big fish had their own threats, and small shrimps had their own abilities. If he wasn't careful, he would stay here forever. However, Xiao Xian didn't understand what was so special in the depths of the forest where danger lurked everywhere. Chapter 272. In order to reach the direction indicated by the knot, they had to cross the river. Xiao Xian walked along the river for some distance, but did not find a place to cross directly. So he asked Cha-cha to give him a lift. While grabbing Cha-cha's claws, Xiao Xian saw a hunting scene by the river. A gibbon-like animal with long and sharp claws was attracted by the shiny objects by the river bank. It wanted to dig them out and take a look, but a water arrow suddenly shot at it. However, the animal's reaction was fast. It stopped digging and quickly dodged. 2 consecutive arrows did not hit the target. Perhaps it was because it had lost Xiao Xian. The fish in the water was a little anxious. More of its head that was hidden under the water appeared, and some fan-shaped scales could be seen. Another 3 water arrows were shot out. The first 2 water arrows blocked the escape route of the prey on the shore. When the prey hurriedly turned around, the 3rd water arrow hit the target. The prey on the shore was hit and staggered, but it only paused for a moment. The next water arrows arrived one after another. A sharp and mournful cry rang out in the forest as if it was going to pierce through one's eardrums. However, its cry only scared off a few timid birds. The other creatures in the forest did not move because of its cry, except for the fish in the water. The fish's body was about 6 or 7 meters long. It looked big and heavy. Suddenly, it jumped out of the water and landed on the river bank. Its developed pectoral and pelvic fins were like 4 legs. After it landed on the shore, it bounced up again. It opened its big mouth with sharp teeth and bit down on the prey that was slowed down by the continuous water arrows. Xiao Xian could clearly hear the crisp sound of bones. The prey's eyes were filled with fear and disbelief. The strange fish that had bitten the prey contracted its pectoral and pelvic fins, biting the struggling prey tightly. Its slightly cylindrical body rolled from the river bank into the river. The panicked screams disappeared in an instant, leaving only bubbles on the surface of the water. Everything by the river bank returned to its previous tranquility. Only some bubbles and not too obvious blood floated up from the river. This was the fearsome beast mountain forest that all the tribes were afraid of. Under the seemingly peaceful surface, there were hidden dangers. Even from afar, it gave people a great sense of pressure. Xiao Xian withdrew his gaze. After crossing the river, he returned to the ground and continued to deal with the various kinds of dangers in the forest. He continued to advance in the direction indicated by the knot. While Xiao Xian was moving towards his target in the forest, the shaman was counting the days in the tribe. 6 days had passed. He didn't know when Xiao Xian would return. Whenever she thought of Xiao Xian, she would feel a headache and worry. Just as he was worrying, Ao quickly walked in from outside. "What happened?" the shaman asked. After hearing Ao's words, the shaman knew that it was not about Xiao Xian but something else. He was slightly relieved, but what Ao said had to be treated seriously. The people of the Lu tribe told them that there would be a special expedition team coming. The team consisted of people from some big tribes in the central region. This new matter distracted the tribesmen, so the shaman didn't have time to count how long Xiao Xian had been gone. After 3 days of arduous travel, Xiao Xian finally arrived at the place indicated by the knot. Although there was no sign or stone to indicate that this was the place he was looking for, Xiao Xian felt that this was the place. Looking around, he was surrounded by mountains. It was a part of the mountain range. The peaks of the mountains reached into the clouds, and white snow could be seen. As he approached, Xiao Xian felt that there was something in the mountains that was attracting him. Vigilant of his surroundings, Xiao Xian walked step by step towards the place that attracted him. He didn't know where it was, nor what he was looking for. He just felt that he had to find it. The higher he went, the steeper the mountains became. The trees became sparse, and the attraction got closer and closer. Finally, Xiao Xian came to the entrance of a cave. Looking at the boulder in front of the cave, Xiao Xian put his knife back into the leather sheath at his waist. He took a deep breath, hugged the boulder, and moved it out. With a dull grinding sound, the boulder was moved out of the way little by little. This place was close to the top of the mountain. Although there was no snow, the temperature was much lower than at the foot of the mountain. However, it was as if someone had lit a fire in the cave. As the boulder was moved out of the way, Xiao Xian could feel the warm air blowing against his face. It was a warm air with a stale smell. The only difference was that the inside of the cave was pitch black, and there was no sign of fire. There was a strange force here that repelled the intruders. It was as if the intruders persisted, that strange force would tear apart everything that forcibly invaded like the rotating blades of a blender. However, this strange force gave Xiao Xian a familiar feeling. Cha-Cha hovered in the sky, unwilling to come down. It would rather die than come closer. Xiao Xian did not force it. After moving the boulder, Xiao Xian went to find some dry wood, lit a torch, and walked in step by step. He did not know how long this cave had existed. There were some things at the entrance that could no longer be seen clearly. With a touch, they would turn into mud or shatter. Inside. It was inside. With the torch in hand, Xiao Xian walked into the depths of the cave. Not long after, he saw several people. To be exact, there were 6 standing corpses that had been dead for an unknown period of time. When he did not see them clearly, Xiao Xian thought that they were people blocking his way. After taking a closer look, he realized that they were 6 brown, dried corpses that looked like they were just skin and bones. Their hair was still there. Although the animal skins on their bodies were no longer shiny and were covered in a layer of dust, they were not as flexible as they used to be. They could be easily cut with a knife. The 6 of them completely blocked Xiao Xian's path forward. These 6 people no longer looked like they used to. There were no eyeballs in their sunken eye sockets, but they seemed to be seriously looking at something. Although they were expressionless, they gave off an inexplicable feeling of determination and fortitude. It was as if no one, no matter what, could move them. The closer he got, the more Xiao Xian could feel the power that seemed to want to tear everything apart. His chest churned, and a burning pain spread throughout his body. Xiao Xian had no choice but to use his totemic power to resist. However, the strange thing was that when Xiao Xian used his totemic power and totemic patterns appeared on his body, the strong resistance became gentle and no longer repelled. Instead, it made Xiao Xian feel closer. The strange power that was blocking him was gone. People from the Yanjiao tribe. If they were really from the Yanjiao tribe, then they must be the ancestors from 1,000 years ago, right? Since he was an ancestor, according to the tribe's tradition, they had to bow to their ancestors. Xiao Xian now had the blood of the Flaming Horns flowing in his body. As a member of the Flaming Horns tribe, he naturally had to bow. Xiao Xian put the torch aside and bowed to the 6 people in front of him with the ancestors' etiquette. Bang! The 6 corpses fell. Looking at the fallen corpses, Xiao Xian was stunned. He wondered if he had bowed to the ancestors, but then he thought about it and realized that was not right. Before, these 6 people had blocked the way forward, but now that they had fallen, there was still a passage left. It was not very wide, but it was just enough for Xiao Xian to walk through. Picking up the torch and being careful not to step on the ancestors, Xiao Xian continued to walk in. After walking for about 20 meters, Xiao Xian saw a person sitting cross-legged on the ground. Or rather, it was a mummy similar to the 6 people in front of him. However, this mummy was more complete. Other than being slightly shriveled, its face was still clear. Probably because it was too old, there were more wrinkles on its face. Looking at its clothes, it didn't look like a warrior, but rather like the old shaman. Shaman? Whether it was or not, he had to bow to the ancestors first. Xiao Xian bowed again seriously. Then he felt the strange power from before dissipate like the wind. The temperature in the cave suddenly dropped, as if the torch had been extinguished and the heater was gone. Xiao Xian looked past the person sitting cross-legged on the ground. Behind this person were wooden and stone boxes that had accumulated a layer of dust. Chapter 273. Why did the ancestors of the tribe place so many boxes here? It wasn't just a day or 2 away from the tribe. If there weren't any dangers in the forest, it wouldn't be a long distance. However, there were many dangers in between. Xiao Xian knew that even if it was 1,000 years ago, there wouldn't be much difference. Xiao Xian walked over with a torch. The boxes were tied with some straw ropes, probably to prevent the lids from falling off during transportation. However, if one took a closer look, it was obvious that some of the boxes were tied up in a more complicated way. Even the straw ropes used to tie them were different. The straw ropes were tied into knots and painted with different colors. The knot in the middle was the symbol of a shaman. As for the other boxes, the straw ropes used were relatively ordinary. However, it couldn't be said that the things in these boxes weren't important. Since the ancestors moved them here, they must have important preservation value. Xiao Xian planned to take a look at the special boxes with knots. However, he found that the knots were very difficult to untie. The ropes were also very strong. It didn't seem like they had been there for a long time. Cut them off. Burn them off. Forget it. If the people in the tribe knew about this, they would definitely have opinions and think that he was disrespectful to the ancestors. Putting the boxes with complicated knots aside, Xiao Xian turned to look at the other boxes that were tied with more ordinary methods. He raised his hand to untie the knots, but Xiao Xian only touched them with his hand. The straw ropes that tied the boxes broke and shattered into powder. He pinched the other parts of the straw ropes and found that they were the same. Perhaps because too much time had passed, the straw ropes had lost their original tenacity and were no longer strong. The previous boxes had a higher density, so the ropes used were different. Now that the density was lower, Xiao Xian didn't feel pressured to look at the things in the boxes. Opening the boxes, Xiao Xian saw many animal skin rolls neatly placed inside. Xiao Xian picked up one and unfolded it. This map recorded some things that happened in the Yanjiao tribes in a certain year, such as harvests, disputes, and so on. Picking up another one, it recorded the various wars between the Flaming Horns tribe and other tribes. It also involved several tribes that Xiao Xian was familiar with, such as the Thousand Masks tribe, the Eight Limbs tribe, etc. Xiao Xian knew of several large tribes in the central region. Basically all of them were recorded. Did the Yanjiao tribe attract so much hatred in the past? But soon, Xiao Xian found that his guess was wrong. It wasn't that Yanjiao attracted hatred, but that everyone in that era was particularly easy to attract hatred. According to the records in these scrolls, the tribes were not as peaceful as they were now. Perhaps for the wanderers, the life outside was already very difficult, especially in the resting areas around the bazaar. The traveling teams of various tribes fought with each other every day, and then the fishes in the moat would be implicated. However, it was nothing compared to what was written on the animal skin scroll. Now it was at most a conflict between traveling teams, but what was recorded on the animal skin scroll was a large-scale conflict between tribes. A small fight every 3 days, a big fight every 10 days. It was as common as eating. Not pleasing to the eye? Fight. Fancy someone? Rob. See something good? Rob again. Everything depended on strength. If you could beat them, rob them directly. If you couldn't beat them, rob them secretly. If you couldn't rob them secretly, then you could only give up. If you didn't give up, then you would be beaten and killed. It could be said that in the past, the survival of small tribes was extremely difficult. According to the records, many small tribes were destroyed. The central region was even more chaotic. Because there were many big tribes, there were wars every 2 or 3 days. Today you raided my team. Tomorrow I will destroy your whole team. Even the Mang tribe and the Eight Limbs tribe, which Xiao Xian always thought were good neighbors and close partners, used to be like enemies. Not to mention a bamboo of the Mang tribe on the border of the Eight Limbs tribe. Even if there was a green onion that didn't belong to their tribe, the people of the Eight Limbs tribe would pull it out by the roots. And all the spiders and other things that entered the Mang tribe, as long as they were found and didn't come out again, they were either killed or eaten. Spiders were not delicious? No problem. As long as the people of the Eight Limbs tribe were unhappy, they would eat happily. Among them, there was a scroll written by an unknown shaman. It wasn't so solemn, but had a lot of bad taste. It also wrote a lot of scandals of other tribes, such as whose family was robbed, who was cuckolded, who was pushed down from the position of chief by his own brother. The words were slightly exaggerated, revealing gossip and excitement. Not all shamans were as serious as the old man now. The enmity of a family could easily become the enmity of a tribe. For that era, war came too easily. And the physique and strength of the Yanjiao people made a lot of people gnash their teeth in anger, giving others the impression that they were all kinds of rude and unreasonable. But Xiao Xian could see the complacency and pride of the person who wrote these records from these words. No matter who wrote these records, most of them were like this. As one of the strongest tribes in the past, Yanjiao did have the right to be complacent and unreasonable. It was hard to imagine that the chaotic environment in the past had become much more stable now. Although it was still full of all kinds of barbaric violence and killing, compared with what was recorded in these animal skin scrolls, it was really a world of difference. Why did the tribes that didn't like each other in the past coexist peacefully now? When Xiao Xian was with the traveling team, he also inquired about it, but he didn't know much about it. Anyway, in the past 200 or 300 years, there were no big wars. Except for the Wanchur tribe, which always harassed the small tribes, the other big tribes in the central area didn't really fight with each other. Speaking of the Wanchur tribe, Xiao Xian only saw the name of the Wanchur tribe in 2 animal skin scrolls, and the recorded shaman predicted that the tribe would disappear in 500 years. But in fact, this tribe, which was more unreasonable and brutal than the Yanjiao tribe in the past, had survived until today and had become one of the big tribes in the central area. Between the big tribes, they abandoned their former enmity and put down their hatred. Although they didn't coexist peacefully, at least they seemed to have a cooperative relationship. Xiao Xian could only think of one most likely reason for such a change. They had a common enemy, and this enemy made them afraid. 1 or 2 tribes alone were not enough. They had to band together. The Yanjiao tribe? No, even if the Yanjiao tribe used to be strong, it wasn't strong enough to make these tribes band together for such a long time. Another thing that Xiao Xian felt strange was that there was no record of slave owners. At that time, there were captives, and those who were defeated would be dragged back to work. But there was no record of slave owners, not even one. In addition to these, Xiao Xian went through several other boxes with weak straw ropes and learned a lot of information. It wasn't all about the wars between the tribes, but included all aspects, such as records of farming and animal husbandry. Thousands of years ago, the Yanjiao tribe also mainly hunted. After all, it was close to the mountains, and most of the food was taken directly from the mountains. But there were also plantations, just like the murals that Xiao Xian saw. There were records of plantations, breeding, harvesting. These records were all in the books. Maybe now the shaman of the tribe also had some of these records, but Xiao Xian believed that the records here were much more detailed than those in the shaman's hands. Thinking about it, when the ancestors of the Yanjiao tribe left the old haunt, they were mainly fleeing for their lives. Naturally, they didn't bring many records of plantations and breeding with them. Maybe they didn't even bring them with them when they left, because when the ancestors left, they didn't expect to be gone for so long. The records in the shaman's hands were probably written by the people who left later based on their own experiences. There were too many animal skin rolls in the box. It was inconvenient for Xiao Xian to read them with a torch inside, and he was worried that the torch would damage the animal skin rolls. So he moved the box to the entrance of the cave and opened them one by one under the light of the cave. Xiao Xian didn't doubt the authenticity of these records. It was the shaman who recorded them. On some animal skin rolls that recorded important events, there were some seemingly meaningless words at the beginning, but these were actually the language of the shaman. Whether something needed to be recorded or not, if there was a conflict within the tribe, the right to decide was given to the fire seed and the totem. These seemingly meaningless words were actually a kind of solemn words, indicating that these were decided by everyone together or through sacrifice, and there was no falsehood. In addition to farming, fishing, hunting, and animal husbandry, there were also handcrafts, astronomical phenomena, construction, medicine, war, political life, and so on. Although many of the records were vague and not detailed, and it could be seen that the tribe wasn't proficient in them at that time. For example, there were many limited records on astronomical phenomena and handcrafts, and they could only be regarded as immature. But Xiao Xian was still shocked to see so many records. What was the most important thing for the Yanjiao tribe? Fire crystals? Various kinds of crystal shellfish as property? Or other precious stones? No, none of them. In fact, all of these were at the bottom of the list. The more Xiao Xian knew, the more he understood what was important to the shaman of this tribe. In the tribe, the most important thing was to figure out their own members, origins, totems, and so on. Secondly, they had to set the rules of the tribe, important marriage and funerals, the establishment of a leader, meetings, and so on. The important things were production, war, sacrifice, and so on. These were undoubtedly the contents that the shaman needed to record and pass on to future generations. And these contents, in layman's terms, were what people called history. In the eyes of the shaman, the longer the history and the longer the tribe existed, the more it could prove the strength of the tribe. As for why the Yanjiao's history was kept here, perhaps it was because they couldn't take it away, and they were afraid that it would be put in danger in the old haunt, so they had people bring it here and hide it. After all, few other tribes dared to directly rush into the ferocious beast's mountain forest. The people in the cave had been dead for a long time, and the only thing left was the power that Xiao Xian had felt before. For the invaders, it was a destructive force, but for this cave, it was like a guardian. It had not changed for thousands of years, quietly guarding here, guarding Yanjiao's history, and waiting for future generations to come back. However, to Xiao Xian's regret, there was no detailed record of the fire seed among the books he had seen. Perhaps the older things were sealed in those unopened boxes. Forget it, when he brought them back and let the shaman open them, he would ask the shaman. As long as it was not a secret, the shaman would let him see it. Xiao Xian wondered if he should take these boxes and the 7 ancestors back now, and then say to the people in the tribe, "Look, I found the ancestors again." Chapter 274. Could these things in the box be eaten? No, but these were extremely precious spiritual food for the tribe. The shaman would rather starve to death than throw them away, just like the people who were willing to die here. After careful consideration, Xiao Xian decided to leave these things here for the time being. When he went back, he would call some people to bring back the ancestor's body and the important history of the tribe. There were too many things too precious. Xiao Xian alone and Cha-Cha could not guarantee that they could bring all these things back in good condition. If they encountered some troublesome ferocious beasts, not to mention bringing people and boxes back, they might even lose them. This risk could not be taken. The strange power that existed in the cave before had disappeared. Perhaps it would not appear again. Its guarding task had been completed. In order to prevent other creatures from destroying the ancestor's body and the precious history after the power disappeared, Xiao Xian set some traps at the entrance of the cave before leaving. He also went to the forest to find a lot of insect-repellent plants and sprinkled them in the cave. For these insect-repellent plants, Xiao Xian even fought with a giant bear. His arm bone was almost broken. That giant bear was much bigger than the 2 he saw in the old haunt. Sure enough, the deeper they went into the forest, the stronger the ferocious beasts. After dealing with the things in the cave, Xiao Xian left and went in the direction that Cha-Cha told him. The original goal of this trip was to find the stone that Cha-Cha found. He did not expect to have an unexpected harvest. It was not a waste of a long trip. More than half of the stone found by Cha-Cha was embedded in the mountain wall. Its color was a little different from the surrounding stone, and its hardness was also very different. There were scratches and marks caused by various animals or other natural phenomena on the surrounding stone walls, but there were very few on this stone. Good, very good. Xiao Xian spent some time to dig out the stone. The hardness of the stone was good. It was at least a high-quality stone. It was big enough. Standing on the ground, it was estimated to be nearly 2 meters high and 1 meter wide. It was oblong. Xiao Xian tested it. The deeper he went, the harder the stone became. Although it wasn't easy to find high-quality stones, they weren't rare either. However, Xiao Xian was interested in better stones. Perhaps the core of this stone could reach the highest grade. He was out of stock, so he had to prepare more good stones to bring back and grind them into tools. Xiao Xian was heavier than a normal rock, but with the Yanjiao people's superior strength, he could carry the rock and even jog for a while. However, his speed was greatly reduced in the forest. Sometimes Xiao Xian would have to throw the stone down first and find an opportunity to carry it away. Carrying the stone back was indeed a difficult experience, but it was worth it to be able to find such a stone. Because carrying one more stone consumed a lot of energy, and he had to save enough energy to deal with all kinds of creatures that might attack him. Xiao Xian didn't have time to study not divination this time. He wasn't used to carrying a heavy stone for the first few days, but gradually he got used to it. Sometimes he could even use the stone as a shield to block the attacks of those ferocious beasts. Now the weight he could carry was getting heavier and heavier. In this way, he walked and stopped. When Xiao Xian returned to the tribe, it had been 29 days since he left the tribe. Xiao Xian didn't expect to be away for so long. He said that this trip wouldn't take 3 or 5 days, but he didn't expect it to take nearly 30 days. Jiao, Cha-Cha flew down from the air and called a few times to Xiao Xian. There are outsiders in the tribe? Xiao Xian was puzzled. Could it be the Wanshi tribe? But now it didn't look like a war. Xiao Xian made a gesture to let Cha-Cha continue to pay attention to the situation in the air. After a short rest, he carried the stone with one arm and the dead prey with the other hand, and walked back to the tribe. The prey was a python, nearly 20 meters long. Xiao Xian encountered it when he woke up in the morning to look for food. He was almost attacked by it, and it took him some effort and time to deal with it. Thinking that he should be able to return to the tribe before dark, he didn't throw the python away, but dragged it back by its tail. There were many snakes bigger than this one in the forest. Xiao Xian had seen several snakes over 30 or 40 meters long, but Xiao Xian always avoided them. He wouldn't provoke them before he was fully prepared. When he came to the border, he met the warriors guarding here. "Xian, you're back. You got a good harvest this time," a warrior said when he saw Xiao Xian carrying and dragging. "It's okay. How's the tribe? Did anyone come?" Xiao Xian asked. "Oh, you've been away for too long, so you don't know?" The warrior thought of something and lowered his voice, saying, "Some people came. I heard that they are from the big tribes in the central region. The people who went hunting recently didn't go out. No wonder I didn't meet them along the way. They didn't go out hunting." Xiao Xian understood and asked about the people from the central region. "I don't know why. You have to ask the shaman and the chief. But I don't like those people. They are so arrogant." The man curled his lips and said. After listening to them, Xiao Xian walked back to the tribe. Now the sun was about to set. He had to go back in time for dinner. After eating in the morning, he didn't stop except for 2 short breaks. The tribe looked a little different from when he left. The leaves of the trees became denser. There were some farmlands not far away. The seedlings in the fields had grown a lot taller. When he left, they just showed their tips. Because he was carrying the stone and dragging the prey, Xiao Xian didn't go directly to a crowded place. He took a little detour. At this time, many people who came out to work had already gone back, so there weren't many people in the places where Xiao Xian passed. As he walked, Xiao Xian heard someone talking in front of him. The voice was very strange. There was more than one. Alas, that's why I said this Flaming Horns tribe, in fact, is not as exaggerated as other people say. Chu Su and Su also said that they are very powerful. I don't think so. That's right. When I heard those rumors before, I thought that they were all monsters. I was disappointed when I saw them. A soft female voice said. There's nothing special about them except that they are a little stronger. So what if they are a little stronger? Do you think you can kill people by throwing stones at them? The man couldn't help but laugh. Others also thought that this was funny and laughed. The man continued, How do you think they can fight when they're carrying rocks? Like this? Like this? Or like this? Well, I've seen this before, haha. However, he soon found that everyone's laughter had stopped, and the atmosphere was a little strange. He heard a sound approaching behind him, but he didn't care. So what if the people of the Yanjiao tribe heard him? At worst, he would fight. He wasn't afraid. However, everyone's faces were stiff, as if they had seen something incredible. There was also a person who had a good relationship with him winking at him and motioning him to look behind him. The setting sun fell diagonally in front of him. He couldn't see who the person behind him was from the shadow. Just as he was thinking about whether to turn around and take a look, he heard a voice behind him. "Hey, you're in the way." Xiao Xian looked at the person in front of the road with feathers of various colors on his head. He was standing there like a monkey holding a watermelon. He thought, where did this idiot come from? The person in front of him turned around, and the first thing he saw was a big stone. The pressure was so great that he couldn't help but move to the side. Xiao Xian didn't say much. He carried the stone and dragged the snake home. He glanced at the people present and didn't find anyone he knew, so he didn't look at them anymore. If he wanted to fight, he could wait until he was full. In any case, these people wouldn't leave for a while. He was hungry now and was considering whether he should roast or boil the snake when he got home. Looking at the person who left as if nothing had happened, the young people who stood there were silent for a long time. Then one of them asked, "Who was that person just now?" The others didn't answer. They didn't know either. At this moment, they only had one thought: damn, that person just now looked about the same age as us, but he was so strong. It was as if he wasn't carrying a big stone, but a bucket, and he wasn't dragging a big python, but a dead fish. His footsteps were quite light. Chapter 275. When Xiao Xian returned home with the snake's tail and the stone, old Ku was cooking meat soup. While cooking, he complained to Caesar, who was lying outside the window. Seeing Xiao Xian come back, old Ku threw everything aside and went to help Xiao Xian take the snake. "This snake is quite big. Where did you hunt it?" Old Ku looked at the snake in front of the house, went into the house, took out his tools, and planned to cut it. "Not far from the tribe. I just killed it and dragged it back. This stone is the one Cha-Cha found. It's good, right?" Xiao Xian moved his shoulders. His shoulders hurt from carrying the stone for too long. Old Ku touched it with a small stone knife and nodded. "It's really good. It's worth your time. Oh, you should go to the shaman's place. I'll take care of this snake." "Okay, I also have something to tell him." "Wait, I almost forgot. Don't go to the stone house near the fire pit. The shaman is not there. He and the chief are in the big house over there. They are talking with the people from the central tribes. They haven't come back yet. You can go there directly." Xiao Xian looked towards the direction old Ku was pointing at. There was a relatively magnificent stone house, located at the border of the core area. There were no other houses around it. Basically, there was only one house, which was very eye-catching. The shaman asked everyone to build it after he knew that people were coming. He and the chief have been talking with the outsiders these days. Old Ku explained, "Okay, I'll go there and have a look." The ground was paved with stones. Even if it was raining, people would not step on the mud on the ground. This was not there before Xiao Xian left. There were many warriors around the big stone house. Most of them were from the Yanjiao tribe, but there were also warriors from other tribes. These foreign warriors were not all from the same tribe. Even those with poor eyesight could tell that they came from at least 3 different tribes. The style of clothing was too obvious. The clothing of each tribe was related to the tribe's totem and customs. For example, the people of the Mang tribe liked to wear green. Some of them were light green, while others were dark green. The material of their clothing was similar to linen, and there were jade stones hanging from their bodies. Judging from the jade, these people were at least intermediate totem warriors. The clothes of the people of the 8 Limbs tribe had a silky texture, which was the specialty of their tribe. Some warriors even had spiders of different sizes crawling on their bodies. There was also a tribe with feathers on their heads. They were similar to the people that Xiao Xian had encountered before. Their faces were also painted with various colors, making it impossible to see their original appearance. The Feather tribe? When Xiao Xian was observing these people, he found that they did not care about Xiao Xian at first. However, there were 2 people that Xiao Xian had seen before. Su and Chu Su both looked at Xiao Xian. They had a deep impression of Xiao Xian, especially when they saw Xiao Xian beat 4 people by himself. Now they could not help trembling when they thought about it. As for the other Yanjiao tribe warriors who were guarding outside, they unconsciously smiled when they saw Xiao Xian. "Are you here for the shaman?" a warrior asked. "Yes. Why don't you go and ask if I can go in first?" Xiao Xian said. One of the warriors who often acted as the shaman's guard was familiar with Xiao Xian. He did not think that the shaman would stop Xiao Xian from entering the house. However, the situation inside was complicated, so it was better to ask. Not long after the man entered the house, he came out and motioned for Xiao Xian to go in directly. Seeing Xiao Xian walk in, a few people from the other tribes were unhappy. There were several important people inside. How could a small fry like Xiao Xian be allowed to enter? Who is the guy who just went in? Why can he go in? Someone asked. He is Xiao Xian, Chusa said. The man who was about to say something turned to look at Chu Suo and Su. He is that Xiao Xian. Yanjiao Xiao Xian had been known by some people before the Yanjiao tribe came back. However, when they looked for him later, they could not find him until the whole Yanjiao tribe appeared. Several Yanjiao warriors looked at the people opposite with ridicule and said, "Why can he go in?" "Because he is the elder of our tribe. So far, he is the only elder. His position is second only to the shaman and the chief. Why can't he go in?" The Yanjiao warriors had long been dissatisfied with those people from the other tribes who always had a sense of superiority. Why? Now these people were still dissatisfied with the elders of the tribe. As long as you dare to say, "We dare to fight." Seeing that the situation was not good, an older warrior pulled the people in front of him. "That's enough. We are not here to quarrel. Be careful of the team leaders." Xiao Xian did not know that there were sparks outside the stone house again, and a fight almost broke out. After he went in, he saw 4 people from the other tribes, 3 sitting and 1 standing behind. Among the 3 sitting people, Xiao Xian had seen one of them before. He was Huang Yi, a senior totem warrior of the Mang tribe with a 3-horned jade. Huang Yi looked at Xiao Xian carefully. When he saw Xiao Xian for the first time, he did not take Xiao Xian seriously. He only thought that Xiao Xian was an insignificant person in a small tribe until Chusa told him about the Yanjiao tribe. Xiao Xian did not care about the 4 people's eyes and went straight to them. When the shaman saw Xiao Xian, a smile appeared on his expressionless face. He waved his hand and signaled Gigu, who was standing behind him, to bring a chair over. Here, except for the shaman and the chief, who were sitting, Gigu and Ta were standing. However, after Xiao Xian came, he became the 3rd person from the Yanjiao tribe to sit. Seeing this, the eyelids of the 3 people sitting across the table twitched at the same time. On the side of the Flaming Horns tribe, those who could sit here naturally had a very high status in the tribe. Even the 2 team leaders couldn't sit here, but this young man dared to sit here without any change in his expression, and the others didn't show any signs of objection. Obviously, Xiao Xian's status was even higher than the 2 team leaders. How old was he? He was not even a senior totem warrior. Let me introduce you. This is Xiao Xian, the elder of the Yanjiao tribe. Xiao Xian said. As the only non-senior totem warrior in the room, this person was not afraid at all. Surrounded by the momentum of a senior totem warrior, he was very natural. Huang Yi was very confused about the word elder, but now was not the time to ask in detail. He might not get the answer even if he asked. Mang Lin, Huang Yi. Huang Yi said. Wei Ba Qiu. The person next to Huang Yi said. That person looked about the same age as Huang Yi, but with a smiling face. He was not as serious as Huang Yi. Guji of the Feather Tribe. The 3rd person said. Because there was too much pain on his face, his original face could not be seen. I just came back from the forest. I'm very sorry to disturb your discussion. Xiao Xian said. However, although he said so, he didn't look sorry at all. Huang Yi was about to say something, but the shaman said first with a faint smile, as the elder of the tribe, you are qualified to know what we are talking about. Oh, what are we talking about? Xiao Xian asked. The shaman briefly told them about their conversation just now. There were 2 things. First, they suggested that the Yanjiao tribe should not fight with the Wanshi tribe. All 3 of them had the same idea. Here, they also represented the 3 tribes. The second thing was that there would be a special traveling team in the central region every year. Most of them were young people from different tribes. This time there was 1 more Yanjiao tribe, so they came to have a look and ask about the candidates. Chapter 276. The shaman and Xiao Xian were so engrossed in their questions and answers that they ignored the other 3. Ao thought it was funny. He didn't interrupt and let Xiao Xian and the shaman talk. Then he looked at the other 3 with great interest. Still showing their faces? Who do they think they are? Our enmity with the Wanshi tribe has nothing to do with the other tribes. Why don't they let us start a war? Xiao Xian asked. The shaman sighed. They say we will be in trouble. How much trouble? Xiao Xian asked again. The shaman sighed again, very big. Oh, what if we start a war? Xiao Xian asked. This time, before the shaman could speak, Huang Yi finally couldn't stand it anymore. We suggest you not to start a war with the Wanshi tribe for your own good. If Yanjiao really starts a war with the Wanshi tribe, you will suffer. We are just reminding you out of kindness. Do you really think the Mang forest is willing to interfere in your affairs? Huang Yi tried hard to restrain himself from yelling. The people of Yanjiao were really as stubborn as everyone said. Ignorant. Is it because of the slave owners? Xiao Xian suddenly asked. Huang Ye's anger, which had just burst out, seemed to be directly slapped back by a big fan. He thought the people of Yanjiao only knew how to solve problems with brute force. He didn't expect to hear Xiao Xian's words. Qiu Gu of the Eight Limbs tribe and Gu Ji of the Feather tribe were also surprised. Not only these three, but also the shaman, the chief, and the two team leaders were shocked. They really didn't know. Although they were very unhappy with the other tribes interfering in their own war, they knew there must be a reason. They didn't expect Xiao Xian to suddenly say such words. They are behind the Wanshi tribe? Xiao Xian asked again. The room was silent. Even Huang Yi, who almost cursed just now, was silent with a cold face. I see. Xiao Xian nodded. Then let's talk about the second thing. What's with this special traveling team? Xiao Xian's sudden turn of events made the three of them confused. They all looked at Xiao Xian. What do you mean by I got it? Now that I know, what then? Do you agree to not start a war for the time being, or what? Give me a definite answer. Changing the topic just like that? Huang Yi didn't want to talk. He actually had a lot of things he wanted to say. He wanted to teach this arrogant brat a lesson, but he couldn't say anything. It was suffocating. Qiu Gu, who still had a smile on his face, took over the conversation and said, The reason why we organized such a traveling team is to allow you youngsters to interact with each other more. After all, now is not that chaotic era filled with vengeance and killing. Understanding each other more is beneficial. Secondly, Xiao Xian, you mentioned the slave owners. Most of the people in the tribe have a very limited understanding of the slave owners. The formation of such a traveling team is also to let everyone know more about the threat the slave owners pose to us. Xiao Xian only believed 30% of what Qiu Gu said. But he was also sure that the tribes in the central region were indeed united to guard against the slave owners. Among the slave owners, Xiao Xian had only seen Shishu and had never seen anyone else. But if the big tribes in the central region were so afraid of the slave owners, they must have their reasons. I'll join, Xiao Xian said. Qiu Gu glanced at Xiao Xian, and a light flashed in his slender eyes. This is not urgent. Such a traveling team is not for everyone to join. Your strength must be recognized by the others in the team. The Yanjiao tribe was very strong in the past. They had no objection to this after learning about it. But after all, it was not the same as before. Did the Yanjiao people still have the fighting power of the past? They were skeptical about this. Looking at the current living state of Yanjiao, they were quite suspicious that the Yanjiao people had regressed. When other tribes were improving, the Yanjiao people were retreating. How could they trust the Yanjiao people's ability? This time, they decided to come to the Yanjiao tribe to have a look. They were just curious about the records left by their ancestors, but they were disappointed. There is one more thing I want to remind you. This traveling team has a lot of casualties every time they travel. More than half of them have died. Qiu Gu said. Speaking of this, whether it was Qiu Gu, Huang Yi, or Gu Ji for their tribe, it was a heavy burden. More than half of them had died. Not more than half of them had died. This traveling team, which was basically formed by the big tribes in the central region, had such a high death rate. It was obvious that the traveling team had encountered difficulties. The shaman and Ao's faces changed. They would rather not join such a traveling team than see Xiao Xian get into trouble. The shaman was about to say something when he heard a koob sound. It was very clear in the quiet room. What's more, the people sitting there all had good hearing. Well, I think everyone must be hungry. Why don't we stop here today and continue tomorrow? Xiao Xian said. Qiu Gu and the other two looked at each other and nodded. Okay. In that case, let's continue tomorrow. Ao got up and said. They needed to have a good talk about this. Besides, it was really late now. Ao asked Ta to take Huang Yi and others to a place to rest, and he went to the stone house with the shaman and Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian asked Ao for a piece of jerky to satisfy his hunger temporarily. When they arrived at the stone house, he didn't answer Ao and the shaman's doubts. He told them about the ancestors and the history in the forest. At this time, the shaman and Ao didn't care about the Wanshur tribe, the traveling team, or the slave owners. For them, compared with the ancestors and the history of Yanjiao, these were all behind. That night, Ao called the 2 team leaders and the 10 hunting team leaders together for a discussion. He selected 50 people from the list of hunting warriors and asked the leaders to tell them that they had 1 day to prepare, and the day after tomorrow they would go to the forest with Xiao Xian to bring back the remains of the ancestors and the precious history. The next day, Huang Yi and the other 2 met the Yanjiao shaman, the chief, and the young elder face to face again to continue what they didn't finish yesterday. However, they soon found that the chief of Yanjiao was looking somewhere and was always absent-minded, and the shaman seemed to be absent-minded all the time. Only Xiao Xian was talking to them about the traveling team and the slave owners. At noon, they finished the discussion. On the Yanjiao side, Xiao Xian chose to join the traveling team, and the others would discuss it later. Anyway, it was not time for the traveling team to set off yet. This was the idea of the shaman and the chief. Since they had decided, it was a foregone conclusion. As for the requirement to join the traveling team, Xiao Xian was confident that he only needed to find a person who was confirmed to be in the traveling team to fight with him. Because they had to leave for the forest tomorrow, this matter must be solved today. Who should he find? Xiao Xian looked at the accommodations arranged by the tribe for the outsiders, and his eyes swept back and forth. While Xiao Xian was choosing a target to fight with, Huang Yi and the other 2 were also discussing it. The people of Yanjiao are strange today, Huang Yi said. Is there something we don't know? Are they still unwilling to give up and want to kill Wanshur now? Guji of the Feather Tribe said. No, I don't think so. Chogu thought for a while and said to Guji, what did you find with the birds? Speaking of the birds, although the team leader of Yanjiao also had a white falcon at the level of a ferocious beast, it alone might not be able to stop all of them. They had not only brought the 2 that were visible, but also 2 that were hidden very well. Guji took out a palm-long bone flute and blew it. However, after a long time, the 2 that were visible appeared. It seemed that they had fought with the white falcon of Yanjiao, and their feathers were messy. And the 2 birds that they were very concerned about and secretly paid attention to Yanjiao's movements were still nowhere to be seen. Huang Yi suddenly said, do you still remember that there is a giant mountain eagle in Yanjiao? It is said that the eagle easily defeated an eagle of the Hui tribe. Guji. He had a bad feeling. At the same time, not far from the border of the Yanjiao tribe, on the peak of another mountain, Cha-Cha pressed a struggling bird on the ground with one paw and stepped on it with the other paw. You are still screaming? You want me to step on it again? When Cha-Cha stepped on the bird under his foot until it couldn't even make a sound, not far from him, another bird had been stepped on and fainted. Many of its feathers had been pulled out, and it was lying there motionless, dying. Chapter 277. Xiao Xian didn't know that Cha-Cha had already tortured the 2 birds in the Feather Tribe until they were on the verge of death. He was now thinking about who to fight. He didn't know much about the people from other tribes. If the people he chose were weak, he would definitely be judged by those people as not capable enough, so he could only choose the weak ones. However, who were both in the traveling team and had good strength. So troublesome. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian smiled again. Since it was so difficult to decide, why should he choose by himself? If he had the time to choose, he might as well go back to peeling stone cores and making stoneware. Why should he stand here and think about it and waste time? Why not just let those people stand out by themselves? All Xiao Xian had to do was to fight. At this time, those people from other tribes were in the resting place arranged by the Yanjiao tribe. Their range of activities in the Yanjiao tribe was limited, so they felt bored after 2 days. They just chatted in the room. Xiao Xian came when they were chatting happily. After explaining his intention, these young people were excited. They had been bored for 2 days after coming to the Yanjiao tribe. It was rare to have such fun, so they naturally wouldn't miss it. Not all of them were qualified to join that traveling team. Some were not strong enough, but this didn't prevent them from watching the fun. Huang Yi and the others naturally heard the noise here. They didn't have time to think about whether the 2 birds were shot and eaten by Yanjiao people in private or taken away by the eagle. The 3 of them came outside the room and looked at Xiao Xian standing there, as well as the people around him who were eager to fight. You decided so soon? Huang Yi was quite surprised. Who are you going to choose to prove your strength? I don't know who joined that expedition team, and I don't know who will join. However, this isn't important. Xiao Xian's gaze swept across the people in front of him. There were young ones, and there were also other totem warriors who were nearing their middle age. He continued, whoever joined that team and thinks they're strong, step forward. Huang Yi raised his eyebrows. So confident? Originally, he thought that if he gave the other party time to prepare, the other party would carefully investigate before choosing a person that he could deal with. After all, there were differences in strength among those who were qualified to enter the travel team. However, he did not expect to receive such an answer. Was he stupid or overconfident? Xiao Xian's words also made these young people unhappy. They were young and impetuous. Just a moment ago, they wanted to watch the show from the sidelines. Now, Xiao Xian's words provoked their fighting spirit. Let me. The first to step forward was a tall and strong man. He looked a little older than Xiao Xian. The muscles on his exposed arms bulged, making him look very powerful. Judging from the clothes he was wearing, this man was from the Eight Limbs tribe. Let me do it. Another person stood out, holding a stone axe in his hand. Although I haven't joined that team yet, I think my strength is still not bad. A third person stood out. Then there was the fourth, the fifth. There were also several older people. If it weren't for the fact that they felt it was too bullying to stand out, they would also speak out. Huang Yi waited and waited, but still didn't hear what he wanted to hear. He couldn't help but look at Chu Su. He saw that guy looking at the leaves on a tree next to him. It seemed that the leaves were so beautiful that they attracted all his attention. What's so good about a tree full of insects? Seeing Chu Su like this, Huang Yi felt even angrier in his heart. Shouldn't you stand out at this time? Should you give the opportunity to others? Chu Su was still looking at the crooked tree on the side, whose leaves had been gnawed by insects. It seemed that he didn't know the situation at all. Qiugu looked at Su, who stood quietly aside without saying a word, and wondered in his heart, isn't this kid usually very hot-tempered? He can kill people if he is unhappy. Why is he so quiet now? Okay, stop arguing. Let me do it. A young man with colorful bird feathers on his head stood out. Guji raised the corner of his mouth and glanced at the cold-faced Huang Yi and the depressed Qiugu with a complacent face. Hongxi, be careful, Guji said with a smile in his eyes. Seeing that Hongxi didn't bring a knife, he handed his knife to him. Hongxi didn't want to take the knife because he also had his own weapon. However, after thinking about it, he took it. Hongxi of the Feather Tribe will also join the traveling team this year, Hongxi said. Xiao Xian looked at the man standing not far away. This was the guy who blocked the road yesterday and joked about the strength of the Yanjiao tribesmen. Yanjiao Xiao Xian. Since it was decided that Hongxi would fight, Chu Su, who had just been paying attention to the leaves, immediately shifted his attention. He looked at the two people who were ready to fight over there and whispered to Su, let's make a bet. If you lose, lend me your white-haired spider to play with for a day. Su touched the white-haired spider under her body to comfort her. The white-haired spider she held in her arms in the past could now be used as a chair. What are we betting on? Su asked. Who will win between Hongxi and Xiao Xian? I bet on Xiao Xian, and you bet on Hongxi. If I lose, I will give you 2 bamboo rats. After a pause, he added, the 2 fattest ones. Su glanced at him indifferently and said, I won't bet. While Chu Su and Su were talking, the 2 people over there had already started. Xiao Xian moved first. Like a leopard hunting in the mountains, he moved quickly and punched fiercely. However, although Xiao Xian was fast, Hongxi was faster. His body seemed to be lighter in an instant, like the twisting of the air. Every time, he could easily avoid Xiao Xian's fists. Hongxi was not in a hurry to fight. It seemed that he wanted to play with his opponent. Looking at Xiao Xian's fierce offensive, Guji nodded and said, his style is really Mianjiao. In terms of strength, the people of the Feather Tribe would definitely lose. Even if Guji fought in person, he could not withstand Xiao Xian's intensive and fierce offensive. This was a natural weakness. However, in terms of speed, the people of the Feather Tribe were not afraid. Even the people of the Mang Tribe and the Eight Limbs Tribe had to admit this. While Guji and Qiugu were evaluating, Chu Su and Su looked at each other in silence. At first, they also thought that Xiao Xian's attacking style was indeed very fierce and violent, as described by their ancestors. But the more they knew, the more they doubted it. Yes, the people of Yanjiao did have an absolute advantage in strength, but in terms of speed, they might not lose. Sure enough, before Guji finished his second sentence, the situation over there changed again. Xiao Xian stopped his offensive. He was not as tired as others thought. Instead, he was in the mood to move his hands and feet. Warm-up is over. Pay attention. After finishing his words, Xiao Xian moved again. The totem patterns covered his elbows, and the totem power climbed to the limit in an instant. If Xiao Xian's figure was like a leopard in the forest just now, then now it was like lightning, and his speed was more than doubled. The movement of his footsteps on the ground was not big. Every time he looked over, his feet had already left the place, leaving only scattered dust. Hongxi's eyes focused, and he no longer had the mood to play games. In the face of such a fast and fierce attack, he planned to temporarily avoid it, and then look for an opportunity to attack. However, he did not expect that when he decided to avoid it, Xiao Xian almost moved at the same time. The soles of his feet suddenly turned on the ground, and the ground collapsed because of the force from the soles of his feet, leaving a pit. Xiao Xian's body suddenly changed direction with the force. The sound of friction between his galloping body and the air was like a strong arrow shot by a strong bow. With a sharp sound of breaking the air, he appeared in front of Hongxi in an instant. His arm was like a spear that was thrown out with great force, rushing straight to Hongxi. He could not avoid it. In the face of an unexpected situation, Hongxi only had time to block the rushing fist with his saber. If he couldn't block this punch, his bones would probably crack. There was a muffled bang. The saber successfully blocked the rushing fist, but Hongxi's footsteps were disordered. People who often hunted had a long-term habit of not giving their prey any time to breathe. The rapid sound of breaking the air still did not stop. This time, Xiao Xian did not bombard him from the front, but after catching up, he jumped up and punched. The shadow of his fist came down from above. Bang! Once again, he blocked the fist attack, but Hongxi felt the strong force transmitted through the saber. He had no time to care about the pain in his arm, and only felt his body sinking down. He thought, oh no, the ground here was not as sturdy as other places. It was mostly mud instead of rock. Therefore, Hongxi's ankles had sunk into the ground after withstanding such a powerful attack. It was not easy to retreat. He wanted to jump out, but before he could jump up, another punch came down. Everyone only heard a series of dense bangs like a rainstorm, and Hongxi, who was under such an attack, was like a hammered nail. Every time he was hit, he sank a little. Chapter 278. In just a breath's time, Hongxi, who was standing on the ground like everyone else, sank into the ground from his waist down. Those who stood in front of Hongxi and wanted to fight with Xiao Xian at first, listened to the boom and felt as if they were hit by the fist, which made their scalps tingle. This guy is actually using his fist as a hammer. Didn't it hurt? Wouldn't his hand bones be broken? Why didn't he use a knife? Didn't Xiao Xian also carry a knife? Why didn't he use a knife? Huang Yi and the others knew that if Xiao Xian really used a knife, Hongxi would have been dead. When Xiao Xian stopped, Hongxi was still in the posture of holding the knife, frozen there. Xiao Xian looked at the three people and asked, "Is it okay?" Huang Yi answered with an ambiguous yes. "That is to say, I am qualified to participate?" Xiao Xian continued to ask. "Yes," Huang Yi said. "Oh, goodbye." After that, Xiao Xian lifted his foot and left. Guji felt the eyes of Huang Yi and Qiu Gu and blushed. Before that, he had asked Hongxi to pay attention. The people of the Feather Tribe hurried over to pull Hongxi out. Guji's broad and thick stone knife still retained the temperature brought by the hit. It was a little hot. They checked Hongxi's injuries. They were not too serious, just a little miserable. He felt the pain of tearing muscles all over his body when he moved slightly. "Hongxi, you should have held the knife with the blade facing up. You could have blocked it. Maybe when that guy's fist came down, it would have been cut off by the knife." Someone couldn't help but say, Yes, and at that time you should have." "Shut up," Hongxi roared with blue veins on his forehead. "Do you think I am stupid and don't know how to use a knife? Or do you think Xiao Xian is stupid and doesn't know how to avoid the blade? If I had a chance, would I be beaten like this? Just in time, that guy hasn't gone far. You take the knife and continue to fight." The others stopped talking. Although Hongxi's weapon wasn't a saber, and he wasn't as proficient in using it as others, it didn't mean that he didn't know how to use a saber. It looked very simple, but when he really faced it, the pressure he felt was completely different. At that time, Hongxi really had an illusion that he was facing a fierce beast from the forest. When he blocked the other party's attack, he felt as if the bones in his hand were about to shatter. Even turning the hilt of his saber was difficult. Hongxi knew that his defeat was justified. What he shouldn't have done was to be careless at the beginning, which led to him being in a passive state and losing in an extremely stupid way. I should have used my own weapon. Hongxi struggled to walk to Guji with the saber, handed it back to him, and said angrily, "When I get better, we'll fight again next time. I'll use my own weapon next time." After a moment of silence, he added, "It's not that I can't afford to lose. I just feel that I haven't shown my true strength yet." Chusu couldn't help laughing. "What are you laughing at?" Hongxi glared at him. "Your feathers are falling off." Chusu pointed to his head and said. Hongxi's face turned red, and he said angrily, "Chusu, wait for me. When I get better, I'll fight with you." Ignoring the quarrel of the young people over there, Huang Yi sighed to Guji and Qiugu beside him. "Now I believe that Huma of the Dishan tribe was killed by him." Before this, Huang Yi and the other two had heard the rumor that Huma of the Dishan tribe was killed by a young man with an eagle in Yanjiao, but they didn't believe it. Because 99% of the rumor was exaggerated and absurd, not to mention the Yanjiao tribe, which was in hot discussion, they didn't take the news they heard at that time seriously. But now it seemed that it was very likely to be Xiao Xian. Alas! Guji patted his forehead. "I forgot to test that guy and see if he knows about the 2 missing birds." Without informing the Yanjiao tribe and secretly with 2 birds as spies, anyone would doubt his motives. In this case, once strange and suspicious birds were found, it was very likely that he would shoot them directly. How to ask? Guji felt sorry for the 2 birds. He had trained them for a long time, and they were rarely caught in the past. This time, he really didn't expect it. The Yanjiao tribe seemed to have a lot of secrets. The next day, the chief of the Yanjiao tribe, Ao, asked Huang Yi and the other 2 to have a talk. When the 3 of them arrived, they saw the 2 dying birds on the stone table and the serious faces of the Yanjiao warriors around them. Huang Yi only felt a headache. "Why didn't I see Xiao Xian?" Qiugu asked. "He has something else to do." Ao didn't intend to say more. Huang Yi glanced around. Except for Xiao Xian, the 2 Yanjiao leaders were not there. What did they do? Forget it, no matter what they did, as long as they didn't go directly to the people of the Wanshi tribe. Ao ignored Huang Ye's doubts, just grabbed the 2 birds and talked with the people of the Feather tribe. On the other side, early in the morning, Xiao Xian left the tribe with Ta and Gigu and went to the Ferocious Beasts mountain forest. Not far from the border of the tribe, there was a team of about 10 people waiting there. Beside them were several ferocious beasts that hadn't shown up in the tribe these days. The shaman thought that these ferocious beasts had nothing to do. Since they were going to the depths of the forest this time, they should take them with them. They shouldn't stay in the tribe for too long and lose their ferocity. Ferocious beasts were better to be ferocious. "Is everyone here?" Xiao Xian looked at the people around him and asked. "Yes," Gigu said. Ta nodded. "Then let's go." More than 50 figures followed Xiao Xian to the depths of the Ferocious Beasts mountain forest. Around these 50 figures, there were some running shadows of beasts. Xiao Xian had walked a part of the road they were taking, telling them what beasts they needed to pay attention to, what dangerous plants and animals were in the forest, and what they needed to pay attention to. However, there was another part that Xiao Xian hadn't walked. Last time when Xiao Xian entered the forest, he first went in the direction indicated by Cha-Cha, and then changed direction halfway. When he went back through the stone. This time they set out from the tribe. In order to find the remains of their ancestors and the history of the Yanjiao tribe that had been left outside for nearly 1,000 years as soon as possible, they almost went in a straight line. There were many unknown dangers, more unpredictable ferocious beasts and harsh environments, but they were not afraid. In such an environment, they had long lost the fear of other tribesmen. What they had was only the excitement of the challenge and the persistence and eagerness to bring back their ancestors and history. At the same time, this road was very likely to be their new hunting route in the future. Since returning to the old haunt, they hadn't decided on a new hunting route, but the matter of their ancestors had helped them solve this problem. Perhaps this was also a kind of instruction from their ancestors. In the past, their ancestors must have often taken this road. Today, the descendants of the Yanjiao tribe would take this road again, and also tell the forest that those who had left back then had returned. The sound of the stone tools striking the ground was endless. Blood splattered everywhere with a thick, suffocating, murderous aura. The roars of the giant beasts in the forest were deafening, and the startled flocks of birds flew in the direction of the setting sun while squawking. Under the dark blue sky, the road was stained with blood, and they pressed forward. Chapter 279. It had taken them 5 days to get here from the tribe, with only a short rest along the way. They had also found 2 caves that could be used as strongholds. Of course, there had been ferocious beasts in the caves, but they had been encircled and killed by them. They had become dinner that night. Everyone had fought a bloody battle. The deeper they went into the forest, the more they felt the familiar, exciting, dangerous, and blood-boiling hunting feeling came back. They liked this old place very much and were very satisfied with this forest. If other tribes knew how the Yanjiao people felt about this forest, they would definitely think that the Yanjiao people were all crazy and liked to live with ferocious beasts as their neighbors. They were looking for trouble. But the Yanjiao people who came from the other side of the river had been in contact with this kind of environment since childhood. Facing this kind of environment, it was easier for them to adapt. Sometimes the 2 team leaders even wondered if there was a place deeper in the forest like a green land, where all kinds of precious and dangerous plants grew. In just 5 days, everyone was like a killer who had crawled out of a thick sea of blood, full of ruthlessness and killing intent. And the ferocious beasts that had been brought out with them looked even more ferocious. If they hadn't softened their eyes when they looked at the Yanjiao people and were obedient enough, they would have looked no different from the native ferocious beasts in the forest at first glance. That's it. Xiao Xian pointed to a place on the mountain and said. Although they hadn't reached that place yet, Ta and Gigu looked in the direction Xiao Xian pointed. They could clearly see a place blocked by a big stone. Behind the stone, there must be the cave where the ancestors lived, as Xiao Xian had said. Taking a deep breath, everyone couldn't help but tidy up their animal skin clothes, patting off the grass bits stuck to their animal skin clothes. Then they went to a spring on the mountain and washed their faces, rubbing away some of the dried blood on their arms and legs. In front of the ancestors, they would treat them seriously. After carefully tidying up, the group went up the mountain. The cave no longer had the protective force that Xiao Xian had encountered the last time he came here. It looked no different from an ordinary cave. Xiao Xian moved the boulder that was blocking the entrance of the cave away and had a few vicious beasts stand guard outside. Then he led the 2 team leaders and the others into the cave. The insect-repelling herbs that were scattered in the cave last time were still there, but the smell was much fainter. Before Xiao Xian left last time, although he had set up traps and scattered some insect-repelling herbs, the power that protected the cave was gone. Xiao Xian was worried that the bodies of the ancestors would rot, so he put the bone ornament on the body of the person who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. The other 6 bodies were also moved closer by Xiao Xian. Since the bone ornaments were able to protect the remains of their ancestors in the King Stoneworm's cave, they should be able to do the same now. After entering the cave, Xiao Xian looked carefully. The 7 bodies of the ancestors were the same as the last time he saw them. They did not rot quickly, which made Xiao Xian feel relieved. Every time they saw the remains of their ancestors, the people of the Yanjiao tribe were very excited. Especially after hearing from Xiao Xian what he saw in the cave last time, Ta, Gigu, and the others wanted to kneel down and kowtow to show their respect for their ancestors. Ta held a torch and carefully followed Xiao Xian into the innermost part of the cave. These are the history. Xiao Xian pointed at the boxes and said, whether it was the ancestors or the boxes that contained the history of the Yanjiao, they would send them back to the tribe at all costs. After seeing the ancestors and the history, the 2 team leaders led the others out of the cave and went down the mountain to chop wood to make palanquins. In fact, they were not exactly palanquins. They were just made to look like 3 carriages. When the time came, each carriage would be carried by 4 people, and the others would guard around it. Xiao Xian and the others rested in the cave for 2 days. During these 2 days, they also finished the palanquins used to carry the ancestors. They carefully put the bodies of the 7 ancestors into one palanquin, and the boxes containing the history were put in 2 groups in the other 2 palanquins. There were limited things left in the cave, and many of them had lost their original appearance. If they saw these things in the tribe, they would definitely throw them away as garbage. But these were left by the ancestors, so they had a different meaning. They took what they could take with them, and left the rest in the cave if they felt it was unnecessary. When the route is opened, we will come back again, Gigu said. They went back much slower. After all, they had to carry the ancestors and the history, and they had to keep them from being destroyed by other ferocious beasts. Naturally, it would take more time. At this time, the ferocious beasts were doing very well. They would attract other ferocious beasts away, and then find a place to kill them, instead of fighting around the palanquins. 8 days later, they returned to the tribe. When they were still some distance away from the tribe, they met the people sent by the shaman and the chief to pick them up, and they also shared the pressure of everyone. Everyone was injured, and so were the ferocious beasts, but they were in good spirits. The former thought it was a great honor to bring back the ancestors and the history, while the latter thought it was a good time to go out and have fun. Although they almost died several times and had many injuries on their bodies, they were happy enough. The people from the other tribes had already left, and the people in the tribe stopped all their work and followed the shaman and the chief to the border to welcome them. Some people didn't know why they had to go out like this at first, but after they told each other, they couldn't help but be excited. Those are the ancestors. What do the ancestors look like? They must be mighty and extraordinary. I heard that those who worship the ancestors will be blessed by the ancestors. I know a warrior who has worshipped him before. Later on, he was able to get through several dangerous situations during hunting. You also found the ancestors before? Yes, I heard it was Elder Shao Xian who found them. Then what about this time? I heard it was also Elder Shao Xian who found them. No wonder he is an elder. For the Yanjiao people, even if the ancestor's body was only a skeleton, it still had a sacred and inviolable aura. Unfortunately, they didn't get to see what their ancestors looked like. They only saw 3 large chests being carried by a dozen people. Welcome back, ancestors. The shaman and the chief were the first to kneel. Thousands of people at the border all knelt down. Even the children who didn't know anything knelt down with the adults. They didn't have their usual naughtiness, and they had a very strange feeling. It was a little heavy, but also a little excited. When Shao Xian brought back the ancestor's body from the cave of the king's stoneworm, the tribe held a ceremony to cremate the ancestors. This time it was the same, but not immediately. Because of the protection of the bone ornaments, the 7 ancestors' bodies wouldn't rot quickly. The shaman put them in a room in the stone house and didn't leave the house for several days. He wasn't facing the ancestors all the time, but he was studying the history that was brought back. Ao also went to read it every day. Gui Zhe, who was chosen by the shaman to be his successor, followed the shaman every day to read the history left behind. There was too much information that they needed to grasp. Shao Xian and Gui Zhe divided the work, categorizing the selected information and then rewriting it, such as the records of astronomical phenomena, farming, animal husbandry, handicrafts, and so on. Although thousands of years had passed, some of the information was still very helpful. Whether it was the shamaness or Chief Ao, although they knew that the Flaming Horns tribe was once glorious, they didn't have a more specific concept. The records left by their ancestors were limited, but now, through these histories, they deeply felt the prosperity of the past. Thinking of the arrogant faces of the people from the other tribes a few days ago, and then thinking of the overbearing Flaming Horn tribe, Ao only felt that there was still a long way to go. The Flaming Horn tribe needed to develop and return to its former strength, but it also needed time. Who are the ancestors that came back? Shao Xian seized the time to ask the shaman. The shaman was silent for a while, and then slowly said, "During the disaster, the shaman of the Yanjiao tribe passed the position of shaman to the next successor and asked the new shaman and the chief to leave with the people of the tribe. He himself took more than 100 people and hid these precious history in the forest to prevent it from being damaged by natural disasters or man-made disasters. More than 100 people, and the shaman guarded the history until the end of their lives." More than 100 people? Shao Xian was puzzled. When he found the cave, there were only 7 people, including the shaman. The others are dead. Not even their bones are left. The shaman stroked a small animal skin scroll in his hand. This was the last record of the shaman. It felt like every word was weeping blood and was extremely heavy. During the disaster, the ferocious beasts in the forest were also frightened by the sudden changes in the world and became manic. Every day, people who went out to hunt would die when encountering such crazy, ferocious beasts. Not even their bodies were left behind. In the end, only the 7 of them were left. Even when they died, their clansmen did not come back. If one day I encounter the same situation, I will do the same. The shaman said, "When do you plan to hold the sacrifice?" Xiao Xian asked. The shaman did not answer, but asked Xiao Xian, "Can you carve the carvings on the stone pillars again?" "No problem," Xiao Xian said. During the time when they left for the ferocious beasts forest, Ao had brought more than 1,000 people to transport several huge stone pillars. Xiao Xian understood the shaman's meaning. He hoped that the pillars could be completed before the ancestors were cremated. Because the stone pillars were too big, it was impossible for Xiao Xian to complete all of them. The shamaness and chief called over some skilled stonemasons to polish the stone pillars. They didn't want the pillars to be bumpy or bumpy. After the first round of polishing, Xiao Xian would carve the engravings in his memory onto the pillars. In the past, Xiao Xian only remembered the carvings on the stone pillars, but did not understand what they were. However, after reading the more detailed records left by the ancestors, he found that many of the carvings on the stone pillars had special meanings. The carvings on different stone pillars were also different. In addition to being used as a sundial, they also had a sacrificial meaning. It was no wonder that the shaman hoped that when the ancestors were cremated, he would repair the damaged and missing things around them according to the records left by the ancestors. That was the most orthodox sacrificial ceremony of the Yanjiao tribes. Chapter 280. According to the records left by the ancestors, there should be 2 tall stone pillars near the fire pit, not 1. When Xiao Xian first came to the old haunt, he only saw 1 tall stone pillar. As for the other one, it might have been destroyed a long time ago. Maybe it was man-made, or maybe it was a natural disaster. In addition, there were other shorter stone pillars. They were not as meaningful as the first 2 pillars, but they were more flexible. Xiao Xian was in charge of the 2 largest stone pillars closest to the fire pit. The other pillars were engraved by other people. He only needed to engrave some symbolic patterns on those pillars. Xiao Xian was responsible for the 2 largest stone pillars. They were located on both sides of the fire pit, in the direction where the sun rose and the sun set. The stone pillars were mainly carved with totem patterns, but these totem patterns were slightly different from the ones on the warriors' bodies. The gaps between the patterns were larger, and some patterns were carved in the gaps. On the stone pillars located in the direction where the sun rose, there were carvings of machetes, bows and arrows, stone balls, hammers, axes, picks, chisels, and other tools that warriors often used, including hunting and daily necessities. In addition, there were also various kinds of ferocious beasts. Although there were many pictures, each picture was not complicated. It only took a few strokes on the animal skin scroll to show their characteristics, allowing people to see what was drawn on it at a glance. On the stone pillars near where the sun set, there were carvings of various plants, flowers, ornaments, and so on. Some of the plants and flowers were planted and picked, and some of them were commonly used herbs. The carvings on the stone pillars represented the meaning of harvest, prosperity, and so on. It was also like a prayer that was divided into 2 parts. Xiao Xian first drew them on a piece of animal skin roll based on his memory, and then cut a piece of wood to try to make a miniature model. The small wooden stake was simple. Xiao Xian started carving the day before, and he could show it to the shaman and the chief the next day. When the huge stone pillars were erected, the tribe was filled with cheers. As long as the wanderers climbed up the trees and pushed away the leaves that were blocking their sight, they could see the 2 pillars that were erected high up on the other side. The short stone pillars in other parts of the tribe were also completed one after another. This was more and more similar to the tribe's appearance thousands of years ago in the records left by their ancestors. Perhaps there would be more changes in the tribe in the future, but for now, they just wanted to replicate the tribe as much as possible. Once the stone pillars were completed, the cremation of the ancestors would naturally begin. This time, everyone clearly saw the appearance of the 7 ancestors. However, no one was afraid. Instead, they were filled with reverence. They knelt down even more reverently and devoutly. They prayed for a good harvest under the protection of their ancestors. They prayed for peace and strength. They prayed for their young children to awaken smoothly. In the fire pit, flames rose and engulfed the remains of the 7 ancestors. Not long after, even their ashes were gone. A strong gust of wind blew from the forest. Perhaps it was due to the influence of the newly erected stone pillars, but when the wind blew, it carried with it a rising and falling sound, as if someone was whispering or singing. Some said that the ancestors who had died in the forest had returned. Others said that the ancestors were responding to their prayers. No matter what the truth was, as long as everyone thought so, no one would really stand out to refute it. After the ceremony of cremation of the ancestors was over and everyone dispersed, Ao walked to the pile of broken stones on the side and stood there for a long time. Most of these stones were broken stone pillars and other building fragments broken by the people of the Wanshi tribe. Every time they saw these, the Yanjiao people held their breath. "We will definitely fight against the Wanshi tribe," Ao said. Sooner or later, there would be a war with the Wanshi tribe. Xiao Xian knew clearly that the Yanjiao people would not be able to accept this and would feel ashamed to face their ancestors. Perhaps the ancestors were worried that someone would come to the old haunt to destroy it, so they took the precious history to the depths of the forest. They took it far away and hid it in a place where no one dared to go. "Perhaps this war is not far away," Ao said, looking at Xiao Xian. "Xian, although I don't like those people from other tribes to intervene in our war, I still care about the slave owners," they said. "After all, those are things we don't know, and the ancestors have never recorded them." As a leader, he naturally needed to consider more and could not act rashly. If there were no slave owners, even if other tribes in the central region opposed, he would still fight. But the slave owners, Ao did have scruples in his heart. The Wanshi tribe, which was predicted by the ancestors to perish long ago, had become strong. What role did the slave owners play in it? "After I join the expedition team, I'll do my best to find out more about the slave masters," Xiao Xian said. Even if he had seen a slave owner, he knew very little. He only knew one thing: slave owners are very ambitious. Ao also knew that the slave owners could make the people of the central tribes fear them and even put down their hatred for each other for the time being. Naturally, they were not easy to deal with. "This time, Lei and Tua will go with you," Ao said. There were 3 people who joined the traveling team in Yanjiao this time. Lei was a very famous person among the younger generation of the tribe. After all, there were tribal leaders in his family. Lei's own strength was also good, and he had a ferocious beast. And Tua was not bad. As a person who joined the advanced team very early, he had enough strength. The gathering time mentioned by Huang Yi was very close, and Xiao Xian and the other 2 were about to leave soon. Before leaving, Huang Yi also took out a map, on which the gathering place was marked. It was a very simple map, with a few monotonous strokes and several general tribal branch marks. It was too vague to find without a guide. Fortunately, Xiao Xian had a more detailed map in his hand. Although it was incomplete, the gathering place mentioned by Huang Yi happened to be near the edge of the map drawn by Xiao Xian. The edge of the map was naturally not the edge of the mainland. Xiao Xian did not know more about the farther places, and could not get exact information from other people. This time, he could perfect the map again. Tua, Lei, and Xiao Xian. Among the 3, Xiao Xian was the youngest, but also the highest among the 3. After all, he was the elder. Therefore, without Ao and other people's advice, Lei and Tua also knew that outside, Xiao Xian's opinion was the main. Besides, they were good at hunting, but not good at finding a place. Because of the special situation, Lei could not take his own ferocious beast with him. So he gave his ferocious beast, Meng, to his father. And Xiao Xian did not take Caesar. There were too many variables outside, so it was inconvenient to take it. You can go hunting with Uncle Mai. When hunting, don't fight, don't run around, and listen to old Ku at home. If you meet a female wolf in the mountains, you can bring it back for everyone to see, but don't let it bite the people in the tribe," Xiao Xian said while brushing Caesar's hair. Caesar was not in a good mood. He was a little upset that Xiao Xian did not take him out. Xiao Xian said a few words to him, and he whispered in response. 3 days later, Xiao Xian, Lei, and Tua left the tribe and went to the gathering place of the traveling team mentioned by Huang Yi. They left before the sun came out. Except for a few people, they did not disturb other people in the tribe. Chapter 281. On the map left by Huang Yi, the gathering place of the traveling team was not a populated place. It was surrounded by wild mountains. Probably because of the weather, it seldom rained in this area, so the vegetation on the mountain was not as dense and thick as the woods in the Ferocious Beast Mountain Forest. There were basically no ferocious beasts, and the number of large beasts was not large either. Such a desolate place was actually the gathering place of a traveling team. If there was no one to lead the way, it would be very difficult to find the exact location. On the top of a mountain, there were several wooden houses or houses surrounded by rattan grass. At this time, some people in different clothes were looking around on the grass in front of the houses. "How is it?" Huang Yi walked out of a bamboo house and asked a middle-aged man standing outside. "The people of the Longboat tribe have just arrived. The rest of them are the Tianshan tribe and the Hui tribe." The man said, "What about the Yanjiao tribe?" Huang Yi asked. "The Yanjiao tribe?" The man didn't remember which tribe the Yanjiao tribe was. After a few seconds, he remembered it and then smiled carelessly. It's the first time for them to participate in this trip. Maybe they can't find the way. The people of the Yanjiao tribe don't have a guide. Another man came and said. They were all people who had participated in many excursions. Although they would not participate in every excursion, they would take turns to lead. Every few years, each of them would act as an experienced elder and a guide, leading the younger generation of the tribe out. If all of them were young warriors who joined the excursion team for the first time, they would not be able to find a place to gather. If no one took care of them, how many people would die? It was possible that the whole team would be wiped out. I heard that 3 people from the Yanjiao tribe will come this time. I don't know if they can survive. A man said, not to mention whether they can survive or not, whether they can find this place on time is unknown. As they were discussing, they heard some people not far away say, "Here they come." In the air, there were 2 dots flying over. The Hui tribe? The Tianshan tribe? Only those 2 tribes would come by birds. For a while, no one could be sure. But after the 2 shadows flew closer, someone said, "They are from the Tianshan tribe." "How do you know?" The young warrior who participated in this trip for the first time was confused. Birds are different. The bellies of the birds on Tianshan Mountain were white. Not the Hui tribe. A man from the Feather tribe said. Even though it was his first time participating, he had done some research on the birds of each tribe and could judge them based on their morphological characteristics. That's true. The 2 silhouettes in the sky flew closer and closer, heading straight for this side. Who? The sound of wings flapping could be heard. Dust and gravel were sent flying, and the powerful claws easily left deep claw marks on the rocky ground. They were 2 huge eagles, standing on the ground with their wings folded. They were about 5 meters tall, and when they spread their wings, they looked even bigger. The feathers on the upper half of their bodies were generally dark brown, and there were some patterns of different shades on the feathers. The parts near the abdomen were pure white, without a trace of other colors. Because they had a few hard and short crests on their heads, at first glance, they looked like they had horns, so they were also called horned eagles. As giants among flying birds, only a few birds, such as the giant mountain eagle, could be compared with them. The front end of its sharp beak was hooked, and it had strong claws and sharp nails that could easily crush the skull of its prey. It had a strong body and a fierce appearance, especially when the hair on its head stood up. When it looked at people, it was like a ferocious monster staring at you. Some young warriors looked into the eyes of the eagles, swallowed their saliva, and avoided their eyes. They were really fierce. There were 5 people standing on each horned eagle, each with a big bow on his back and 3 long feathers on his head. Looking at the 10 people coming, Huang Yi smiled and greeted the leader who was about the same age as him. He asked about the things on the way and whether it went well. But the people of the Feather tribe, such as Hong Shi and Gu Ji, didn't look at the people of the Tianshan tribe with a good face. But the people of other tribes, especially some young warriors, looked at the 2 eagles of the Tianshan tribe with envy. When they came here, they climbed several mountains. If they didn't climb, they would take a long detour. But for the Tianshan tribe, they could arrive directly by bird. How refreshing it was. The people of the Tianshan tribe completely ignored the bad looks around. But for those who looked at them with envy, they smiled back proudly. Not long after the arrival of the Tianshan tribe, the people of the Hui tribe also arrived. As before, there were 2 giant mountain eagles, but this time there were only 9 of them. Is everyone here? Shall we set off now? Or take a rest for 2 days? The middle-aged leader of the Tianshan tribe glanced around and said, "Let's take a rest for 2 more days. Besides, the people of the Yanjiao tribe haven't arrived yet," Huang Yi said. "There are more people? The Yanjiao tribe?" Hearing this name, the people of the Tianshan tribe changed their expressions. They looked at each other and smiled gloomily. The people of the Yanjiao tribe also come this time? No guide? The people of the Hui tribe looked at the people of the Tianshan tribe and frowned with worry. It's the first time for us to join the team. Of course there is no guide, someone said. Without a guide, it would be difficult to find the place. Then let's wait for 2 days. After 2 days, if we still don't see the people of the Yanjiao tribe, we'll set off, the people of the Tianshan tribe said. The other tribes agreed. 2 days was the last chance for the Yanjiao tribe. If they still didn't see the people of the Yanjiao tribe in 2 days, they would leave. 2 days later. In the morning, the people on the top of the mountain came out of their houses. Looking at the rising sun, they packed up and were ready to set off. The people of the Hui tribe looked into the distance and shook their heads with a sigh. Hongxi and Chusu had no choice. Even if they wanted to wait for the people of the Yanjiao tribe, it was impossible. The people of the Mang tribe, the Eight Limbs tribe, the Hui tribe, the Tianshan tribe, the Yu tribe, the Thousand Masks tribe, the Long Boat tribe, and some other smaller tribes in the central part of the tribe walked down from the top of the mountain. But when they reached the mountainside, several eagle calls came from the sky. There were mountain eagles of the Hui tribe and horned eagles of the Tianshan tribe. "They're coming," someone of the Hui tribe said. In the sky, a figure smaller than the other four appeared. With a loud eagle call, it swooped down toward the team. When it passed by the team, 3 figures jumped down. It was Xiao Xian and the other 2. "Finally, we're here. Sorry, it's my first time here, so I'm late." Xiao Xian said to the people he knew among the older people. He didn't pay attention to the other people who were looking at him with a little malice. Huang Yi nodded. "Good. Can you hurry up now?" "No problem," Xiao Xian said. Without a rest, Xiao Xian and the other 2 followed the team down the mountain. On the way down the mountain, Xiao Xian observed the team and found that the undercurrents in the team were not as harmonious as they seemed. Xiao Xian took the time to remind Tuo and Lei to be careful of the people around them and to be vigilant. Although Tuo and Lei were also vigilant, because they had joined the tribe's hunting team before, they were used to the tacit cooperation in the team. Hearing Huang Yi said that they were a united team and partners, they were slightly relaxed and chatted with some people from other tribes around them. But since Xiao Xian reminded them to be careful, they became vigilant. Especially those people from Tianshan Mountain. Seeing that Tuo and Lei still didn't quite understand, Xiao Xian didn't say much, but just reminded them. Don't think that half of the people they said died in the hands of slaves and slave owners. If they didn't die in the hands of others, and there were not many ferocious beasts here, then it could only be their own people. Of course, although they were in the same team, they came from different tribes and were not completely on the same side. Looking carefully, those people from different tribes gathered together, and each group kept a certain vigilant distance between them. After leaving the gathering place, the team went in one direction, where Xiao Xian had never been before. 1 day later, they saw a long slave team of more than 200 people on the road. Long vines tied those slaves together, and next to this team, there were some people with whips guarding. Those were the higher-ranked slaves. Chapter 282. The slaves, whose wrists were bound by vines, wore almost nothing on their bodies. Even if they did, the animal skins were tattered and could not cover much. Under the Yangguang's scorching sun, they were all tanned, their lips were dry, and their faces were haggard. They walked barefoot on the ground. Some of the wounded slaves did not get good treatment, and their wounds had rotted. Some flying insects, which smelled the scent, followed them all the way. "Where are those slaves sent to?" Xiao Xian asked. If he didn't ask, the others wouldn't explain. Of course, he had to take the initiative to ask. Even if he was laughed at by others, Xiao Xian didn't care, as long as he could know what he wanted to know. As soon as Xiao Xian asked this question, some people sneered, but there were also some who answered. It didn't matter if they said it in a mocking tone. As long as Xiao Xian knew the answer, it was fine. "Of course they are sent to where the slave owners live," someone said. "Where do the slave owners live? Is that where we are going this time?" Xiao Xian asked. "What, are you afraid?" A man of the Tianshan tribe said with contempt. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. He looked at the sky, then looked at the surrounding environment, recalled the terrain along the way, and said, "The slave owners don't seem to live in a good place. If they kept going forward, they might reach the desert area." The slave owners lived in the desert? This made Xiao Xian very curious. Although he knew that the slave owners would stay away from the big tribes in the central region to avoid them, he didn't expect that they would run to an arid and barren area. Not good. An older middle-aged man next to Huang Yi snorted. They are really living a good life. Only the slaves are not living a good life. That was true. The slave owners were naturally the ones who were being served. Just then, in the long line of slaves, a slave suddenly broke free from the vines and ran towards Xiao Xian. Although he looked like a bag of bones, he ran so fast that he didn't look weak at all. Someone in the group of slaves shouted and looked at the person running. The dark-skinned slave with unkempt hair was running towards Xiao Xian and the others, shouting with a hoarse voice. He probably wanted to ask for help. Xiao Xian could see the light of hope in his eyes. Puff! A sharpened piece of wood pierced through the running man's body. Blood dripped to the ground, and the light in the slave's eyes was quickly extinguished. A man wearing animal skin and holding a whip walked towards the slave on the floor. On his forehead, there was a tattoo that looked like the character Tai. "It's a slave with the title Tai," someone in the team said. His tone was calm, without any emotional fluctuations because he had just seen a slave killed. Slaves were also divided into classes. The lower-class slaves didn't have any titles, while the higher-class slaves started from Tai, because they would have a tattoo similar to the character Taib on their foreheads, so they were called Taib slaves. In terms of strength, they were equivalent to the beginner totem warriors. For those who became slaves, their initial goal was to be a Taib slave. So what if they became a slave? As long as they could get the strength equivalent to a totem warrior, it was enough. A Taib slave was the lowest class of the higher-class slaves. Above the Tai slave, there was a Poob slave. There were also some Poo slaves in this slave team, but they didn't hold whips, only knives. They didn't seem to care about anything, and seemed to be very harmless. But as long as they took action, the ground would be stained with blood. At that time, it would involve more than one slave. Therefore, when the slave ran away, the Poo slaves just glanced at him casually. Some of them didn't even raise their heads and continued on their way. Anyway, there were Taib slaves who were lower than them to deal with it. The Taib slave strode towards the slave on the floor and glanced at Xiao Xian and the others. There was no vigilance, no concern, no other superfluous emotions. He was numb and as cold as a knife. When he looked at the lower-class slaves, it was no different from looking at other dead things. He bent down, stretched out a hand to grab the dead slave's foot on the ground, and dragged him back to the team. There was a long bloodstain on the ground because of the dragging. The Taib slave dragged the dead slave back to the team, and waved his arm to throw the dead slave into the team of lower-class slaves. Then, Xiao Xian saw those haggard slaves with tied wrists scrambling to surround the slave. That is... Ray stuttered. Over at Eight Limb's side, a cold voice said, "They are snatching food." Their wrists were tied, but they could still move their fingers, arms, and legs. They were snatching food, although the food was the same as them. If they didn't eat, they were likely to starve to death. Only by eating could they survive. Seeing Xiao Xian and the others were silent, someone from the Tianshan tribe said, "You can't stand it? If you really can't stand it, you can save one or two lower-class slaves. If that slave ran closer, you could save him in time." Seeing the reactions of others in the team, Xiao Xian and the others also knew that there was something they didn't know. These people mostly looked at the slaves with disgust in their eyes. Indeed, many totem warriors looked down upon the slaves, thinking that they were spineless and betrayed their ancestors. However, they were not like these people in the team. Especially the people from Eight Limb's side, there was even hatred in their eyes. Xiao Xian learned the reason from Chu Su. A few years ago, someone from the Eight Limbs tribe encountered a similar situation. He saved a few low-class slaves and also killed a few tied slaves on the way. In fact, at the beginning, the people from Eight Limbs were very secretive and disguised. Their identities shouldn't have been discovered, but they were discovered. A young girl from Eight Limbs gave a slave a piece of jerky before she left. The slave saw a spider on her body. Later, the slave failed to escape, was caught and told the secret. Not long after, those who attacked were almost all killed when they went out with their friends and elders. Chusa said, "More than 10 people from Eight Limbs were killed, including senior totem warriors. Among the slaves who attacked them, there were more than 30 Taib slaves and at least 4 Poop slaves. If it was a one-on-one fight, even if it was a servant slave, it would only be equivalent to an ordinary intermediate totem warrior, and it would not be so tragic. However, these slaves were almost suicidal in their attacks. They did not even blink their eyes when it came to injuring the enemy and injuring themselves at the cost of injuring the enemy. They would do the same thing even if it meant injuring the enemy and injuring themselves at the cost of injuring themselves. Slaves were just tools. If the tools were gone, they could just make another one. Those slave owners didn't care. After that, the people from 8 Limbs killed all the slaves, no matter whether they were high class or low class. As long as they attacked, they wouldn't leave anyone alive. They wouldn't give anyone a chance to tell the secret. Chusa looked at Xiao Xian and the other two. In fact, this kind of thing happened a lot. Almost every tribe has encountered it. Remember, those slaves can betray their own beliefs and ancestors. They can also betray anyone. Including betraying their masters? Xiao Xian asked. It depends on whether they dare or not. Different slave owners have different slaves. You'll know when you see more. Chusa said. After the slave team left, they continued to move forward. The slave who was eaten only left a pool of bloodstains and a few pieces of bones that couldn't be pieced together. Some scavenging insects circled around, sharing the last of the delicious meal. Xiao Xian and the others didn't encounter any more slave teams. They took different paths. The further they went, the clearer Xiao Xian could feel the dryness of the air. The surrounding vegetation was sparse. Compared with other places, the number of animals and plants was pitiful. The thin layer of grass on the ground had also withered. After another 5 days of continuous walking, some people in the team had begun to become dispirited. A little further ahead, there will be a tribe. We can rest there for a few days. An elder said. Hearing this, the young people were shocked. A tribe? There's a tribe here? What is it called? The Rain Tribe. Someone answered. Xiao Xian looked at the clear sky. The Rain Tribe. He didn't know how Yang Sui was doing. Had he successfully inherited the position of the Rain Tribe's shaman? Chapter 283. The surrounding land was getting drier and drier, and the creatures in the forest were not so active. After passing through several high mountains, they came to a hilly area. Standing on the top of a small hill, Xiao Xian saw some houses in the distance, as well as large tracts of farmland. However, those farmlands didn't seem to grow well. Because of the lack of water, they not only grew slowly, but also had a high mortality rate. As for further places, they couldn't see clearly, as if they were covered with layers of gauze. That was because there was too much dust in the air, which affected their vision. Because of the drought, when the wind blew, some dust would be brought up. The further they went, the more cracks there were on the ground. Although there were some sparse fine grass, the dry ground occupied most of their vision. That's the Rain Tribe, Huang Yi said to the young warriors who came here for the first time. When they went to the Rain Tribe, the elders would tell the young warriors some things about each tribe. Now that they saw the Rain Tribe, they would naturally tell them about the customs of the Rain Tribe. Although Xiao Xian knew Yang Sui of the Rain Tribe, he knew very little about this tribe. Therefore, when the middle-aged man was explaining to the young warriors of their tribe, Xiao Xian, like the others, also listened attentively. It was always good to know more. The people of the Rain Tribe, their totem is like rain, and they worship water. Their belief in rain is far beyond your imagination. If their tribesmen went to other places and drowned in the river or were eaten by aquatic beasts in the water, most of the time, they wouldn't feel sad. On the contrary, they believed that those who drowned or were eaten by aquatic beasts must have some kind of mysterious power that surpassed others. That was why they could send themselves to the place where God was without the help of external forces. Xiao Xian and others. What the hell? In this case, the crocodiles of the drumming tribe were simply the spokesman of God. It sounded ridiculous, but it was understandable. Every tribe had their own beliefs and worship. Many things that seemed extremely stupid in others' eyes were unswerving beliefs of some people. For this kind of belief, you couldn't change their minds even if you pried open their brains. It is said that the shamans of the Rain Tribe who couldn't pray for rain were burned to death? Someone asked. Not all of them. I heard that in the beginning, there were cases of people being burned to death. But later, they couldn't pray for rain, and it was impossible for the tribe to have no shamans, so they changed it. But in this way, the status of shamans in the Rain Tribe gradually declined. It's said that the Rain Tribe's shaman candidates have to travel outside, hoping to find a solution. Then did you find him? A young warrior of the Feather Tribe couldn't help but ask. The others looked at the warrior who asked the question as if he was an idiot. It sounds like a lie. How can it be possible to get rain? Even the shamans of our tribe can't do it. How can the shamans of the Rain Tribe do it? The people from these small tribes just love to mess around. That's true. The others nodded. He felt that if his tribe couldn't do it, the people of such a small tribe wouldn't be able to do it either. Moreover, praying for rain sounded like a lie. How is God related to rain? But there's one thing I agree with. The divine echo can definitely fly. Yeah, definitely, said the feathered tribesman. Nonsense. How could a god have wings? It must have 8 hands. The people of 8 limbs said. Bullshit. God certainly doesn't look like that. When it came to what God looked like, the tribal warriors of different beliefs quarreled because of different opinions. The people of the Tian Shan tribe thought that God lived in the mountains, but the people of the Mang tribe vetoed that idea. They strongly believed that God should live in the woods, or the kind with bamboo forest. The people of the Thousand Masks tribe didn't speak, but their faces were full of disapproval, telling everyone their opinions. Xiao Xian thought about the Yanjiao tribe. As people who had been brainwashed by shamans since childhood, taught by shamans, they only believed in 3 things: fire, totem, and ancestors. What was God? Was it the fire? Was it the incarnation of the totem? Or was it the deceased ancestor? Or all 3 of them? Listening to the discussions of the people around them, Lei and Tua touched their heads at the same time and began to outline the appearance of God in their minds. If there was a God, it should be with horns on the head, right? Anyway, it was definitely not those who had wings and played with spiders, let alone rain. Well, it must have horns on the head, and its strength was incomparable. Lei and Tua discussed and nodded. They felt that others were simply talking nonsense. Seeing that they were about to fight, the elders who had been staring at each other had to calm down and pull the excited young warriors apart. Hey, who are those people? Lei asked, pointing to a group of people passing by not far away. Everyone stopped quarreling and looked over there. Over there was a team of 9 people. The people walking in front were wearing clothes woven with green rattan and yellow withered grass, with some wooden and bone ornaments. Each person held a pottery bowl in his hand, holding the bowl in one hand and dipping the other hand in the pottery bowl and swinging it vigorously to the side. They swung it every few steps. There should be water in the pottery bowl. Those people had some wooden bells made of nuts similar to walnuts hanging around their waists. Every time they swung their arms vigorously, because of the movement of their bodies, the wooden bells hanging around their waists would also swing, making a clattering sound, which sounded like the sound of rain hitting the ground. They are the people of the Rain tribe. Huang Yi said. Is that a sacrifice? Someone asked. I don't know, it may be related to their sacrifice. Anyway, let's find a place to rest now. Yes, the Rain tribe will provide houses for travelers to live in. We can just rest there, said someone who had traveled far. The team of the Rain tribe didn't walk fast. When Xiao Xian and his team arrived, they just passed by them. These people of the Rain tribe had totem patterns painted on their faces with paint, so their faces couldn't be seen clearly. But Xiao Xian still recognized Yang Sui, who was walking in the front. Yang Sui's clothes were a little different from the other 8 people behind him. They were more complicated, and the pottery bowl in his hand was not a simple one. It was a little higher, and there were some stripes and dots on the outside of the bowl, like running water and rainwater. Yang Sui also saw Xiao Xian. He was stunned and wanted to say something, but realized that it was not a good time to say hello and talk about the old days. Then he saw the people around Xiao Xian and thought of something. His eyes quickly moved to the tribe. He wanted Xiao Xian to go there first, and then he would talk to Xiao Xian after he finished here. The Rain tribe built a row of wooden houses on the edge of the tribe for travelers to live in. They only needed to pay a certain accommodation fee. Other people wouldn't pay for people who didn't belong to their tribe. Fortunately, Xiao Xian had a lot of money with him. He gave some shell coins to the guards of the Rain tribe to exchange for a wooden house for 3 people. The wooden house was very simple, but in such a place where trees were hard to see, they had to make do with it. They exchanged some dry food with the people of the Rain tribe. It was a kind of hard flatbread. Xiao Xian and the other 2 people were not used to it, especially Tua and Lei. They hunted ferocious beasts to fill their stomachs. It was the first time for them to eat such food in such a place. I think our tribe is really good, Lei said. Tua felt the same. Biting the hard flatbread, he asked Xiao Xian, how long do we have to stay here? Will we encounter places that are even worse than this in the future? How long we stay depends on the elders. As for the future, you'd better be mentally prepared. Xiao Xian gave them a look. The expectant look on Lei and Tuo's faces suddenly collapsed. It was worse than this. They would rather go to the ferocious beast mountain forest alone for 10 days or 100 days than stay in such a place, where even a beast was hard to see. No wonder they said before that this trip would be more difficult. After a short break, a young girl who brought in water smiled at Xiao Xian and gave Xiao Xian a leaf. After the girl left, Lei and Tua winked and joked. "Xian, is it the custom of the Rain tribe to give leaves? Is there anything written on the leaf? Let me see." Xiao Xian avoided the two, quickly glanced at the words on the leaf, and then ground the leaf. Lei and Tuo's faces were disappointed. "I'll go out for a while. If there is anything urgent on the team, blow the whistle." After a pause, Xiao Xian said again, "Guard against the people of Tianshan Mountain." I know. Go ahead, elder." Tuo waved his hand. Before leaving the cabin, Xiao Xian saw people looking at him from the window of another house. Over there, the people of the Tianshan tribe lived. Someone at the window was holding a bow, and the arrow was aimed at Xiao Xian. He did not shoot, but just kept the posture of aiming. Seeing Xiao Xian look at him, the man smiled, which made people feel very uncomfortable. The people of the Tianshan tribe were hostile to Xiao Xian and the other two. Was it because of the Dishan tribe? Or was it because of other reasons? In any case, this kind of hostility made Xiao Xian always guard against them. No longer paying attention to the people over there, Xiao Xian knew that they did not dare to do anything blatantly. After leaving the cabin, Xiao Xian went in one direction, where there was a small hill. There were some cabins on the hill, which did not belong to the Rain tribe. Xiao Xian would not be stopped. These cabins were much more dilapidated than the place where they had temporarily rested. Looking at the straw rope hanging on one of the cabins, Xiao Xian walked over. The door panel was half closed, and Xiao Xian saw the people in the room. One was the young girl who gave him water and leaves, and the other person sitting on the ground was Yang Sui. At this moment, Yang Sui was holding an oxtail, gazing at it affectionately. Before the young girl gave him water, Xiao Xian had seen her once. She followed Yang Sui, but at that time it was difficult to recognize her because of the pattern on her face and her clothes. When Xiao Xian came, the girl was talking in a low voice. Hearing the noise, she stopped and looked up at Xiao Xian. "You're here?" Yang Sui did not look very good. After washing the pattern on his face, there were dark circles around his eyes. "You don't seem to be doing well. Did you fail to become a shaman?" Xiao Xian asked. "No, I'm a shaman now, but I'm about to fail." Yang Sui sighed. Chapter 284. Yang Sui put down the oxtail in his hand and stood up. Seeing Yang Sui casually throw the oxtail away, the young girl next to him glared at Yang Sui. Then she squatted down and carefully picked up the oxtail and put it into a long wooden box next to her. There was a layer of hay in the wooden box, and the oxtail was just right in it. Yang Sui forced a smile. "Is it necessary? It's useless anyway." He briefly introduced them. Xiao Xian knew that the young girl was called Misu, who grew up with Yang Sui. Now she was also one of the witches who followed Yang Sui. She would also participate in the sacrifice. "I heard that your Yanjiao tribe went back? Did you come with those people in the central region?" Yang Sui asked. "Yes." Looking at the two's faces, Xiao Xian asked, "What happened on your side? Are you going to be ousted?" Yang Sui scratched his head. "Kind of." After a moment of silence, Yang Sui said, "It's okay if I don't want to be a witch. However, what's worse now is that I might be burned to death." Bang! Misu threw away the wooden box in her hand. She didn't care about the oxtail that she had carefully put in the box. She roared with red eyes, "I haven't prayed for rain yet. How do you know it won't come down?" "Everyone knows that." Yang Sui smiled dejectedly. "It's just a matter of time before I'm burned to death. If you knew it, why did you lie to us? Just say that you can't pray for rain. Why did you admit it?" Misu was so angry that her tears flowed down. She wiped her face and put the oxtail back into the box, put it in Yang Sui's hand, and strode out, regardless of whether the dust on her hands was on her face. As he ran out, he even kicked the half-closed door away. Xiao Xian looked at Misu, who ran away after kicking the door, and then looked at Yang Sui, who was standing there with a dejected look, and asked, "What's going on? What happened?" Xiao Xian knew that when Yang Sui was competing for the position of the witch candidate, he observed the time when it might rain, and then he made a coincidence and finally defeated other competitors. Yang Sui's face was worse than crying. "I regret it." Recalling the situation at that time, he thought, I'm courting death." He should have told the truth under the pressure of the leader. Seeing Xiao Xian again in such a rare situation, Yang Sui briefly explained the situation to Xiao Xian. When he came back from his travels, he did successfully become a wizard. However, at the end of last year, a new leader took office. The leader supported another competitor at that time. It was unknown how he learned that Yang Sui had cheated at that time. As soon as he took office, he started to make trouble for Yang Sui. In addition, there had not been a single drop of rain since the beginning of the year. The new leader seized the opportunity to ask Yang Sui to pray for rain. Yang Sui said it was difficult. If it had been someone else, it would have been fine. But the new chief wanted to promote his own people, so he openly questioned Yang Sui's ability to pray for rain. He said that it was just a coincidence that he met Yang Sui and did not pray for rain with his real ability. He also deceived everyone and disrespected the ancestors and the totem. Because of this, God punished them, and there was no rain this year. If this continued, as the weather became hotter and hotter, the soil would quickly dry up, and the crops in the fields would not be able to last much longer. He even used Yang Sui as an excuse to deceive the gods. What? To say that it was the previous leader's idea to admit it? Bah! How dare he slander the late previous leader? Yang Sui, you should be burned to death. He asked me to pray for rain. If I failed, it would mean that I angered the gods and they wanted to burn me to appease the gods. Yang Sui took out the oxtail from the box and swung it casually. He continued, "In fact, many people knew that it was an excuse, but there was no other way." The chief said it. Moreover, under his instigation, many people really thought that if I failed to pray for rain, burning me to death would solve the problem. In the past, Yang Sui was able to succeed because the previous leader supported him. The previous leader knew that there was a coincidence in Yang Sui's prayer for rain. But at that time, he needed to stabilize the people in the tribe and an opportunity to expand his reputation. That was why he put pressure on Yang Sui when he was about to explain. "How many people support you now?" Xiao Xian asked. Since the chief did not dare to burn Yang Sui directly, but still delayed it, he must have some scruples. "The chief's supporters are more than half of mine. But after the day after tomorrow, probably no one will support me anymore." Yang Sui smiled bitterly. "Pray for rain the day after tomorrow?" Xiao Xian asked. "Yes, I have been preparing for the rain these days. I have also practiced several times in private. These oxtails are for me to practice." Yang Sui held the oxtail and swung it at Xiao Xian. "Yesterday I broke an oxtail. This is a new one." "You need an oxtail to pray for rain?" "Yes." Yang Sui swung the oxtail in his hand. "When I pray for rain, I have to hold an oxtail in my hand. But this one is just for me to practice. When I pray for rain officially, I will use another oxtail carefully prepared by my supporters. It is not something that can be used casually. What are you going to do? If you can't pray for rain, are you going to stay here and be burned?" "What else can I do?" Yang Sui spread out his hands. "I used to think of running away when something happened, but I can't. My family and friends are here. The tribe is here. The fire is here. Where else can I run to? I don't want to be a wanderer, let alone a slave. I would rather be burned to death." The room was silent for a while. "When's the next rain? Is the rainy season coming?" Xiao Xian asked. "There will be no rain for a while. As for the rainy season, it is later than in other places after the full moon." Yang Sui explained. This was really a problem. The rainy season had not arrived, so it did not rain. Xiao Xian could not think of a good way at the moment. Artificial rain? In this mysterious place, Xiao Xian really did not know what to do. "Go back. The sand is flying." Yang Sui said, "While I am still a shaman, I can provide you with some delicious food. I will ask someone to send you more water and food later." Xiao Xian looked out of the broken window. He could see the blue sky just now, but now it became a little turbid and gray. Dust began to rise in the air outside. "If you stay for 2 more days, you can still see me being burned to death." Yang Sui laughed at himself. Holding the wooden box with the oxtail in his hand, he walked out of the room. "I advise you to go back early, and don't go out tomorrow." Xiao Xian walked out of the wooden house and returned to the place where they rested. The surrounding visibility had decreased a lot, and the sky was a turbid yellow. The blowing wind was wrapped with sand and dust, and it was everywhere, covering the sky and the sun. The people outside were a little difficult to breathe. They squinted their eyes and choked from time to time by the dust. For the people of the Rain tribe, They were used to it, but for the young travelers who came out for the first time, they were not used to it. Looking at the dark sky, they all felt depressed. I think the place where our tribe is located is really good. Lei looked at the weather outside, closed the window, and said to Xiaoxian. For Lei and others, they would rather live in the ferocious beast mountain forest than in such a desert. But for the people of the Rain tribe, they were completely opposite. They would rather live in such a place than set foot in the ferocious beast mountain forest. It's like this outside. Let's go to bed early. Maybe when we wake up, there will be no sand outside. Tuo thought optimistically. Xiaoxian was not so optimistic. Yang Sui said that it was better not to go out tomorrow. Obviously, it would be worse than today. Xiaoxian still believed in Yang Sui when it came to astronomical phenomena. As for praying for rain, rather than saying that the people of the Rain tribe worshipped the water falling from the sky, it was better to say that the people of the Rain tribe worshipped the powerful force behind the rain. The rain was just a messenger of power, a stage for the powerful and mysterious force. They believed that whoever could pray for rain had such power, and they would worship him wholeheartedly. However, whether that kind of power really existed and how powerful it was unknown. Chapter 285. In the Rain tribe's wooden house for the wanderers to rest, the traveling team rested for a night. As for how they slept, you could tell from their constipated faces the next day. When Xiaoxian opened his eyes, the light in the house was very dim. But with the biological clock formed over so many years, he knew that the sun should have come out long ago. The wooden house here was built simply, with many gaps in the roof and the surrounding wooden walls. If there was a Yangguang outside, he could come in through these gaps. But now, the people in the house felt that it was still dark before dawn. There was a little bit of light, but it was still dark in general. What's going on? Tuo turned over and got up from the wooden bed covered with hay that was slightly higher than the ground. He also felt that it should be the time when the sun should be in the sky, but he didn't see the light that should be there. He always felt a little gloomy and depressed. Huh, Tuo said doubtfully. Xiaoxian also turned over and got up. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he felt a layer of soft sand on the floor of the house. Creak, Xiaoxian opened the door. The gray wind suddenly blew in, making them hold their breath. After the door was opened, there was a little dim light in the house. With the help of the light, the three people saw the situation in the house. Except for the place where they slept, there was a thick layer of dust everywhere. At this time, there was a lot of dust leaking from the roof. The people of the Rain tribe were thoughtful. Above the wooden bed, near the roof, there was a layer of straw mat. The dust leaking from the roof fell on the straw mat. No wonder I heard the rustling sound last night. It was so noisy that I couldn't sleep well. Lei looked at the situation in the house and said with a yawn, people who often hunted in the mountains would definitely not be in a deep sleep. Even the slightest movement could alert them. Even the sound of sand falling to the ground could be heard quite clearly in the quiet night with their hearing. In this weather, are we still going? Tuo asked. I don't think so. Xiaoxian heard footsteps approaching outside the house. Soon, Huang Ye's figure appeared at the door of their house. Let's rest here for 2 days and set off when the weather gets better, Huang Yi said to the three people. All right, got it, Xiaoxian replied. Also, you guys be careful. Every time there is a sandstorm in this area, some things will come out. Be careful. Huang Yi had intended to warn these young soldiers who came to this place for the first time. By the way, he would make things more serious and those creatures more terrifying. Only then could these young soldiers, who were easily confused and careless, be alert. However, as they talked, Huang Yi found that the atmosphere was not right. As soon as he looked up, he saw 3 pairs of shining eyes. For some reason, he couldn't finish his sentence. After thinking about it, Huang Yi suddenly understood. That's right, the Yanjiao people were different from the people of other tribes. These Yanjiao people lived alongside ferocious beasts. How could they be afraid of creatures that suddenly appeared? Maybe they were thinking about how to catch them as food. Huang Yi was right. Xiaoxian and the other 2 really wanted to catch a few such beasts for a change. The Yanjiao people liked meat the most, and those hard flatbread really couldn't supplement them with enough energy. Huang Yi sighed. Anyway, he had delivered the message, so he turned to another wooden house to inform others. Xiaoxian looked at the sky outside. In the distance, there was a tinkling sound from the Rain tribe. Because there was too much dust, he couldn't see the situation over there. But according to Yang Sui's words, They were building an altar for praying for rain. Thinking of praying for rain, Xiao Xian sighed. When he was about to close the door, his hand suddenly stopped. Lei and Tua behind him also stopped what they were doing. The three people glanced at the place near the wooden table in the house. A thick layer of dust fell from the table leg, and now the surface of the dust was slightly raised and still moving. Obviously, there was something under the dust. Lei and Tua looked at each other, and almost at the same time. It's mine. It belongs to whoever grabs it. The creature under the dust was aware of the approaching danger. Suddenly, it sped up and rushed out of the house. Xiao Xian saw a slender earthy figure flashing from the door and rushing into the dust outside. It's a snake. Xiao Xian reminded the two to be careful. In such a place, snakes always had the ability to protect themselves. Maybe it was highly poisonous. Lei and Tua were still somewhat restrained in the house, for fear that they would destroy the house and have no place to live. Now that the snake ran out, they were happy and rushed out of the house. The snake under the dust was originally buried in it. With the rapid approach of Lei and Tua, it also suddenly shot out like a spring. It was a snake with the thickness of a thumb and a length of 1 meter. It stood up, opened its mouth, and showed 2 sharp teeth. Venom sprayed out. Chi! Xiao Xian stood at the door and could hear the sound of the venom corroding the dust. Tua was the first to cut off the snake's head. After cutting off the snake's head, he flattened it with a knife. When they were in the forest, they would always use this method to catch snakes because some snakes would still bite people after their heads were chopped off. After learning their lesson, every time they encountered a snake, no matter what kind of snake it was, they would use this method to prevent future trouble. Mine. Tua held the headless snake in his hand and waved it at Lei. Lei did not look at the other side again, as if he was listening to something carefully. He turned around and took 2 steps back and jumped up. Under the totem pattern covering half of his arm, his muscles tightened. He swung his arm and waved the stone knife in his hand, vigorously chopping down. Boom! The hard soil on the ground exploded. Among the flying pieces of soil and dust, a figure quickly jumped out. Xiao Xian's eyes focused on the creature that rushed out. Pangolin? No, the creature looked much thicker than the scales of pangolin. Its body was more slender, nearly 2 meters. Its body color was similar to the soil, with a sandy yellow color. The whole creature did not move slowly because of a layer of hard armor. On the contrary, it moved very quickly. The creature had been looking for a chance to run away or get into the ground, but Lei and Tua did not give it a chance. Under the joint hands of Lei and Tua, it did not hold for more than 3 breaths and was cut down. Lei did not stay outside for a long time. He dragged the creature and seized the time to skin it. Although it was the first time he saw such a creature, he had encountered similar ones. He was not unfamiliar with the skin and handled it in 2 or 3 strokes. He did not expect to have extra water to clean it. Lei carried it into the house. Today their food was guaranteed. The layer of hard armor was not left behind. It could be used for self-defense. They also wanted to catch another one. Unfortunately, the movement just now was too big. Even if there were more underground, they had escaped. They could only wait and see. The movement of Lei and Tua made the people around who had stayed in the house to open the windows or doors and see what had just happened outside. Xiao Xian did not make a move just now to guard against other people, not only in the team, but also some people of the Rain tribe nearby. Not everyone of the Rain tribe was very friendly to them. Just now, some people wanted to come and grab it, but when they saw Xiao Xian staring at them, they did not make a move. After Xiao Xian and the other 2 entered the house, the others took back their sight. The people of the Yanjiao tribe are really in a house, someone said. It was true that everyone had different ideas. Xiao Xian and the other 2 lit a fire in the house and simply roasted the animal meat. Although the meat was not delicious and there was a lot of sand, it was much better than those hard flatbread. After eating, Xiao Xian planned to go out. Lei and Tua now knew that Xiao Xian knew the current shaman of the Rain tribe, so they did not say much. After eating, they began to rest. They thought that after waking up, they would go out and see if they could catch 1 or 2 more. Against the wind and sand, Xiao Xian went to the hill yesterday. Yang Sui still stayed in the wooden house, holding an oxtail in his hand in a daze. Probably because he came here early in the morning, a layer of dust had fallen from his body. Why do you pray for rain with an oxtail? Xiao Xian went in and asked. Hearing Xiao Xian's question, Yang Sui came back to his senses and looked at Xiao Xian. He shook the oxtail in his hand and did not hide it. This was not a very important secret. It is said that in the early days, our ancestors prayed for rain and offered stones as sacrifices. Those stones are not ordinary stones, but a kind of stone called rain stones. If you dig in the nearby mountains, you can dig up some of them. It is black and very cold in hot days. The rain stones we use for rain are almost as tall as a person. When we pray for rain, we hold an oxtail and use it as a whip to whip the rain stone. Can we pray for rain like this? Xiao Xian asked. It is also accompanied by a sacrificial dance, but that is auxiliary. Whipping stones for rain is indeed the earliest way of praying for rain. But later, we don't know when the way of praying for rain changed. Our ancestors said that behind the rain stone, there is a more ancient spirit of the ancestors. It is the protector of the tribe's good weather, agriculture, and harvest. It can eliminate diseases and disasters. Everyone began to be afraid of the rain stone. In order to protect the prosperity of the tribe, we can no longer whip the rain stone. Otherwise, it will bring disaster. Those who whip it will not live long. When Yang Sui said this, his tone was a little sarcastic. It was not that he disrespected the ancestors, but he had doubts about some things. Ordinary people did not dare to have these doubts and would not think too much about it. Only those who had deep contact with it would investigate it deeply. The so-called "those who whip it will not live long" was probably because praying for rain consumed too much power of inheritance and needed to sacrifice some of it. Weaker people would probably be exhausted after praying for rain once. In addition, as Yang Sui said, praying for rain was getting more and more difficult. Shamans naturally had to bear a great psychological burden. After all, shamans were burned to death in the rain tribe. Under the double pressure of physiology and psychology, it would be strange to feel comfortable. If a person with a weak physique prayed for rain once, all his physical strength would be drained and he would die. Then why do you still use the oxtail instead of whipping stones for rain? Xiao Xian pointed to the oxtail in Yang Sui's hand. This is for asking for forgiveness. We ask the ancestors and the gods to forgive our mistakes. We offer the oxtail whip to pay for our sins. Yang Sui swung the oxtail in his hand casually, and his eyes flashed with sarcasm. I heard that there was a shaman who was whipped by the gods after praying for rain. Xiao Xian's face twitched. So, praying for rain was from, will it rain? If it doesn't rain, I'll whip you till I'll ask for rain? The people of the Rain tribe played the SM game of whipping and asking for whipping with their god of rain. But there was no rain after the whipping. Chapter 286. No matter how different the process of praying for rain was, one thing was for sure. The people of the Rain tribe were very realistic. No matter what kind of lies you made up, as long as it worked, they would believe it firmly and carry it out strictly. Otherwise, no matter how much you paid, if you didn't get the result they wanted, they would treat you cruelly. They could push you as high as they could before, but now they could pull you down and step you into the fire again. Take Yang Sui as an example. Compared with the Yanjiao tribe, the status of the Rain tribe's shaman was really low. However, different shamans were different. If the Yanjiao tribe also had shamans like the Rain tribe, they would be in the same situation as the Rain tribe. Xiao Xian thought it depended on the people. Yang Sui probably thought that he didn't have much time to live, so he didn't hide his words. There were many things he couldn't say to the people in the tribe because it sounded too rebellious. But it was different for the people outside the tribe because the people outside the tribe didn't recognize the affairs of other tribes. Yang Sui didn't hesitate to say it and vented his resentment. After a moment of silence, Yang Sui lowered his eyes and swung the oxtail on his hand. He sang in a hoarse voice, "White drizzle, yellow mud road. God in the sky, rain is the clothes." Please, this was a song that many people of the Rain tribe could sing. When did they stop praying for rain? How long had it been? Hundreds of years? Thousands of years? Or even too far to remember? White drizzle, yellow mud road. What kind of scene is it? I really want to see it. Yang Sui said. The records left by the ancestors were not complete, but everyone knew the songs passed down from generation to generation. Unfortunately, no one could imagine what kind of scene was described in this song. No one knew, because those who knew were no longer around. I heard that when praying for rain is successful, the rain falls down in a line, and all the ground becomes mud. People walk barefoot on the wet mud and enjoy the washing of the rain. Yang Sui said, mud wasn't a derogatory term here. For the people of the Rain tribe, mud or mud, was a scene they looked forward to because in most of their memories, the ground was hard and cracked. While they were talking, the girl named Misu, whom Xiao Xian had met yesterday, came over with an unconcealed anger on her face. She probably didn't expect to see Xiao Xian here. Surprise flashed across her face, but she didn't pay much attention to him. She turned to look at Yang Sui, who was sitting on the ground. Two more quit. Those bastards. Misu was very agitated. Yang Sui tightened his grip on the oxtail and said calmly, "If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. Let's see who is willing to fill the vacancy. Those who are willing to fill the vacancy will get double the shell coins. What's the point of adding shellfish?" Misu roared. He Chao took them away with shellfish. If you can give him shell coins, why can't he? Yesterday, one of them had already left. It was hard to find someone to fill the vacancy, but now, another one had left. Who else could it be? Who knows if anyone will leave today? The He Chao mentioned by Misu was the shaman's competitor with Yang Sui. Yang Sui won that time, but now, the chief Hang Mang supported He Chao and suppressed Yang Sui. Day by day, Yang Sui's supporters were decreasing rapidly. Yesterday, Yang Sui said that the other side had more than half of his supporters. But the next day, half of his supporters were gone. They probably thought that Yang Sui, the shaman, couldn't pray for rain, and even the shamans who followed him would suffer. Before, there were still some people who followed Yang Sui because of the supporters behind him. But now, under the coercion of the He Chao and the chief Hang Mang, a group of supporters stood on the opposite side. Naturally, there were also some shamans who changed their positions. According to the requirement of praying for rain, all 8 shamans were indispensable. But now, they couldn't find a suitable person to fill the vacancy. If they couldn't fill the vacancy, they couldn't even pray for rain. They failed directly. This was the rule set by the ancestors, and it couldn't be changed. Want to change it? Well, if you could pray for rain, the people of the Rain tribe would certainly not object. But if you couldn't pray for rain, you could only follow the rules. And Misu took 2 deep breaths to calm herself down, and then said, "The oxtail they prepared for you was also taken back and given to He Chao. Not only was the person taken away, but even the well-prepared oxtail was also given to the enemy." Praying for rain? How could he pray? If it went on like this, he didn't need to prepare anything. He just needed to prepare to be burned to death. What should we do? The ceremony will begin tomorrow. Misu was so anxious that she walked around the room. Are there any oxen in the surrounding mountains? I can go and look for them. Xiao Xian said. No need. Yang Sui waved his hand and raised the dusty oxtail in his hand to Xiao Xian, and said, "This is enough." Which oxtail can't be used as a whip? The ancestors didn't say what kind of oxtail must be. What about the witch? Xiao Xian asked. If you need shell coins or something else, I also have some here. We don't need shell coins. We also have some. When Misu looked at Xiao Xian, her face softened a lot. Although Xiao Xian was not a member of the Rain tribe, she was grateful that he was willing to help at this time. But we don't have enough witch. As soon as Misu's voice fell, a voice came from outside, who said it's not enough? Yang Sui, who was sitting on the ground, suddenly jumped up and looked at the door in astonishment. A pair of calloused hands moved away the shabby wooden door that was blocking the entrance. Xiao Xian saw 2 middle-aged women with dark complexions coming in one after another. Behind them, there was an old man with gray hair. Although he was old, he was still healthy and his steps were steady. He didn't show much old age. If you don't have enough people, we can do it, the middle-aged woman who came in first said. Mother! Grandmother! Yang Sui looked at the people who came in and was shocked. Mother! Misu was also shocked and didn't know what to say. The 3 people who came in were Yang Sui's mother, grandmother, and Misu's mother. When they saw Xiao Xian, they were slightly surprised. But after Xiao Xian introduced himself, they showed their friendliness and thanked Xiao Xian. They knew that Xiao Xian had helped Yang Sui. You. Yang Sui stuttered. What about us? Our ancestors never said that the witch must be young. Yang Sui's mother said. Their ancestors didn't mention it, but in the Rain tribe, women with long, slender, and curvaceous bodies were considered beautiful. Therefore, when they chose their shamans, they would also choose such young women. Some families would even cultivate them from a young age. So far, there had never been a woman who was older than middle-aged to be a witch. After all, the middle-aged women in the tribe were naturally not as tall as those young people because of hard work. But now, as more and more people changed sides, they couldn't even find 8 witches. So the 3 elders decided to do this. If other people became witches, even if Yang Sui failed to pray for rain, they wouldn't be in danger. But Yang Sui's family was different. The new chief's group was against Yang Sui, so they would be more harsh to Yang Sui's family. Maybe they would even be burned to death together. Looking at the crying people in the house, Xiao Xian left the wooden house. Several middle-aged men stood outside the house to protect it. They should be Yang Sui's relatives or elders. No wonder Yang Sui didn't want to leave these people. They were the only ones in the Rain tribe who would sincerely protect him at this time. Outside the house, it was still muddy and the visibility was low. Xiao Xian planned to walk outside. He wanted to see what he could do to help. Not far away, a lizard as long as half an arm was crawling. Suddenly, a creature rushed out from the sand. Xiao Xian looked over and found that it was the same species as the one they had eaten not long ago. Poor guy, who had just rushed out to look for food, was killed by Xiao Xian before he could eat the meat. Chapter 287. Xiao Xian dragged the hunted prey back for dinner for the 3 of them. When Xiao Xian left, Chu Su and Hong Shi of the Feather Tribe went to find Xiao Xian. Chu Su was bored and didn't see Xiao Xian, so he told Lei and Tua about the Rain Tribe as jokes to pass the time. Hong Shi came to find Xiao Xian to fight, but he didn't find him, so he left. After listening to Chu Su's gossip, Tua and Lei asked Xiao Xian about the Rain Tribe. Xiao Xian told them about it, but they also knew what the situation was now, so they couldn't believe it. How could they treat the shaman like this? In the Yanjiao tribe, no one dared to say no to the shaman. However, they were not interested in the affairs of other tribes, so they just sighed. Poor thing. Like the others in the team, they didn't believe that they could pray for rain here, so they just took it as a casual topic. At dusk, Yang Sui sent someone to find Xiao Xian. As the shaman of the Rain tribe, Yang Sui couldn't come here directly. If he was seen at such a time, it would easily cause trouble to Xiao Xian. It was still the shabby wooden house, but now there was no one else in the house except Yang Sui. He lit a fire and sat on the ground, waiting for Xiao Xian. Next to Yang Sui, there was a bulging animal skin bag. Tomorrow was the day to pray for rain, but Yang Sui didn't seem to be in a hurry. He just looked more silent than during the day. What's the matter? Xiao Xian entered the house and asked. Xiao Xian, I beg you to do me a favor. Yang Sui pleaded. You go first. Xiao Xian found a place to sit down, waiting for Yang Sui's next words. Yang Sui handed the animal skin bag next to him to Xiao Xian. If I can't survive tomorrow, my parents and Misu will be sent out. You, help. Yang Sui probably knew that his request was a little too much, so he stopped halfway. In terms of friendship, Xiao Xian and he were not that close. If Xiao Xian helped him, he would directly go against the Rain tribe. Before Xiao Xian spoke, Yang Sui hurriedly said, I just want you to help them leave the Rain tribe. He Chao and the others want to target me. If they leave the tribe, they will be expelled at most, not hunted. Yang scratched his head. If they are expelled, I hope they can go to the Yanjiao tribe, the ferocious beasts mountain forest. I heard that wanderers followed you. He Sui continued to talk about the tribe and Xian, continued to talk about his follow-up arrangements. He mentioned many people, but didn't talk about himself. Xiao Xian didn't look at the animal skin bag with the shell coins. He asked, is there no chance? No. Xian, helplessly. Said. S's. Said Yang. I hope so. Yang Sui forced a smile. He didn't believe it himself, so he just said it casually. If he could really pray for rain, the new chief and He Chao would be nothing. Yang Sui would not be kicked off the stage, but would stand higher and more stable. But it was impossible. Don't worry. If I can help, I will definitely help. Cha-Cha also came, but now it's hiding away because of the sand. Xiao Xian didn't return the bag of shell coins. Yang Sui didn't feel relieved until he took them. When the time came, if Yang Sui's parents and relatives were really expelled, Xiao Xian would give them back and draw a map to the Yanjiao tribe for them. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Yang Sui showed a rare relaxed expression. Thank you. Xiao Xian waved his hand and asked, if you can't get rain with one method, can't you use another method? For example, you can use the method of whipping stones to pray for rain. Yang Sui smiled and said in a self-mocking tone, it's no use. Not to mention that the rules set by the ancestors can't be easily changed. In fact, as long as you have the ability to pray for rain, whatever you do is right. If there's a problem, whatever you do will be wrong. Xiao Xian was stunned. You mean the key is the shaman? Not the other methods? You can say that. But now the decisive point is not the shaman, but the fire seed. Yang Sui hesitated and said, the fire seed of the rain tribe has a problem. The fire seed has a problem? Xiao Xian was confused. The shaman can start praying for rain, and the fire seed determines the success or failure of praying for rain. Because the fire seed has a problem, no matter how it prays, it can't rain. It was by chance that I found a secret record of a shaman. That's how I came to know about this. They said that the fire seed seems to be asleep. When the shaman prays for rain, he can't wake it up. It only wakes up once a year during the big sacrifice. At other times, it won't wake up. If it's during the big sacrifice, it's likely to succeed. However, during the big sacrifice, it's not a dry season and it's very cold, so people don't have a strong desire to pray for rain. Outside the big sacrifice ceremony, the fire seed is asleep and can't be woken up, so it's impossible to pray for rain. Yang Sui found the hidden animal skin roll by chance. The animal skin roll was still buried under the ground, and only the shaman could understand the symbols and characters on it. You can't wake it up? Xiao Xian asked. If I could wake it up, I would have succeeded. I wouldn't have waited until now. Moreover, this situation has been going on for a long time. In fact, the purpose of the rule that the candidates must travel outside is not to find a way to solve the problem. The main purpose of this rule is to choose a stronger person to be the shaman. Only by becoming stronger can the fire seed be more likely to awaken. Yang Sui patted Xiao Xian and said, don't tell others, or the rain tribe will be in chaos. If the tribe was in chaos, even if the current chief could control it, he couldn't really control people's panic. If it went on for a long time, the development of the rain tribe would become more abnormal. If it was more serious, it might slowly go to destruction. Therefore, those who knew these secrets would hide them until they died. Don't worry, I won't tell others, Xiao Xian promised. Their Yanjiao tribe was far away, and the rain tribe had no influence on the tribe. Besides, Xiao Xian was not a talkative person. After chatting for a while, Yang Sui got up and left to prepare for the death ceremony the next day. For him, the ceremony of praying for rain tomorrow was the death ceremony. Xiao Xian also took the bag of shell coins back to the resting place. The next day, the sand in the sky was more serious. The wind and sand were flying, and the visibility was even lower. It was like a sandstorm. The people in the team all stayed in the wooden house except for going out to trade and look for food. The weather outside was so bad that they didn't want to go out and eat sand. Knowing that today was the time of the rain tribes praying for rain ceremony, no one planned to get close to the rain tribe. At this time, the rain tribe's defense was even stricter. We can't watch the fun, and the weather is bad. Alas! Chusa leaned on the window and looked at the flying sand outside. Close it quickly, the sand is blowing in. The people in the house scolded. With a sigh, Chusa closed the window and asked the people in the house, do you think the people of the rain tribe can really pray for rain? Do you believe this? These small tribes just like to exaggerate and brag. Not only the people of the Mang tribe, but also other people had similar thoughts. They didn't really wait to see if it would rain. They took advantage of these 2 days to rest more. Once the weather was better, they would have to set off again. The following road would be difficult to walk, and it would be difficult to find a place to rest. In the rain tribe, on a high platform built above the fire pit, some things needed for the ceremony of praying for rain were put on it. They didn't need to worry about the fire in the fire pit suddenly, because they had never seen such a situation except for the time of the great sacrifice at the beginning of each year. A lot of people had gathered around the fire pit, and everyone was whispering. Some people were really praying for rain, regardless of who the shamans were. Their farmland had a lot of crops. Some people just wanted to see Yang Sui make a fool of himself. The people headed by He Chao belonged to the new chief's side. They looked at Yang Sui with gloomy and expectant eyes. They were looking forward to seeing Yang Sui being pushed to the fire by the people of the tribe after he failed to pray for rain. Look over there. It's nonsense. How dare Yang Sui? Are they really going to pray for rain? The rain god will be angry. He Chao followed the eyes of the crowd and saw Yang Sui wearing the yellow and green woven clothes for the ceremony of praying for rain, followed by 8 shamans. He Chao's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he saw those shamans. They had coerced some people to leave Yang Sui, so that Yang Sui couldn't gather enough shamans for the ceremony of praying for rain. But they didn't expect that Yang Sui would do this. Where was the flexible body like flowing water? Where were the young and soft girls? Where were the shamans that were cultivated from childhood? Why were there several old women? What was that? Was it a ball? Misu's mother once ate a plant by mistake, which caused her bones to change and her body to be fat, looking like a ball. Even if she was starving to death, she would still maintain this fat appearance. The ceremonial clothes made overnight were a little loose, which made her look even fatter. Although Yang Sui's mother was not so fat, her figure was obviously different from those of the young girls. She didn't have the flexible feeling of flowing water. As for Yang Sui's grandmother, needless to say, she stood there conspicuously. The team of 9 people came out of a house near the fire pit and went straight to the altar. Wherever they went, the people around them avoided them like snakes and scorpions. Some people who were slow to react because of shock also stepped back a few steps after coming to their senses, for fear of being mistaken as having anything to do with these people. Some elders in the tribe who thought they were highly respected almost rolled their eyes and fell down when they saw this scene. How dare they? What a mess! What a bastard! Was he fooling the tribesmen or insulting the ancestors? It was certain that he had offended the gods. God! Yang Sui made such a mess. If the gods were angry, would it never rain in the future? Some people who were too old fainted because they were too excited, and there was another riot. The people who were far away couldn't see the situation over there because of the strong wind and sand, but when they heard the news, they were shocked and speechless for a long time. After coming to their senses, they cursed Yang Sui and his family with the people around them. They should be expelled. Burn them to death. They must be burned to death. Burn them to death. Ask the gods for forgiveness. Chapter 288. Stop them! Stop them! The chief Hangmang shouted and rushed towards them. He had planned to watch them make fun of themselves, so he didn't approach them. But when he saw Yang Sui and the others, his face turned blue with regret. This was not a slap to the face of the new chief, but a provocation to the ancestors. Offending the gods. But thinking about it carefully, it seemed that the ancestors didn't say what kind of person they should use as the witch. But Yang Sui's behavior was indeed a provocation to the ancestors. In his opinion, it was a very unlucky behavior. When the new chief Hangmang called people, Yang Sui and the others had already stepped on the steps of the altar of the rain-praying ceremony. Once they stepped on the high platform, it meant that the prayer for rain began. Hangmang, who had chased them here, clenched his fists tightly and almost spat out blood. He didn't pull out his knife and cut Yang Sui. If Yang Sui hadn't stepped on the altar, he would have killed them on the spot, and no one in the tribe would have said anything. However, these people moved too fast, and he was one step late. Hangmang glanced at the 9 people who were walking step by step to the high platform with his sharp eyes. He still stepped back and didn't approach the fire pit, for fear of being contaminated with bad luck. He couldn't do it now, but when the ceremony was over. Yang Sui, wait for your death. Sacrifice your blood to the gods. Yang Sui didn't look back to see the reaction of the tribesmen, but he knew what would happen to him when he heard the voices below. At this time, he regretted again. Perhaps he should have given up before, so that the tribesmen wouldn't have reacted like this. He was most worried about his friends and relatives who had followed him up. Thinking of this, Yang Sui's steps slowed down unconsciously. At this time, Yang Sui heard the words behind him. Since you're here, you can't turn back. Keep going. This was the voice of Yang Sui's mother. We've come up, and we don't intend to go back. This was Michio's mother. Don't worry, we'll be with you. This was Michio. Although the others didn't say anything, Yang Sui knew their choice when he listened to their footsteps. Yang Sui held the oxtail so hard that blue veins bulged on the back of his hand. After a short pause, he lifted his foot and walked up again. For the rain-praying ceremony, sacrificial objects, decorations, and ceremonial guards had been prepared on the high platform. In addition, there was also a prescribed rain-praying dance and the necessary congratulatory incantation. No matter if it was a rain dance or a congratulatory speech, there needed to be music. Naturally, there also needed to be a performer. Originally, Yang Sui had spent a lot of money to invite people. However, when Yang Sui walked up to the high platform, he found that his father, uncle, and grandfather were all there. Watching Yang Sui standing there in a daze, Yang Sui's father smiled towards Yang Sui with a kongju in hand. Since he had come, he had no intention of going down. Perhaps, without waiting for the ceremony to end, the people in the tribe would set up firewood under the high platform and start a fire. Yang Sui stood on the high platform and looked at the people around him. He gave them a smile, although it looked like he was crying. Dong dong. Bang bang bang, rhythmic music sounded. Holding the oxtail in his hand, Yang Sui looked at the rainstone in the middle of the high platform and closed his eyes. There had never been such a moment when he hoped that rain would fall from the sky, even if it was just a few drops. Although he had always doubted his ancestors, questioned the gods, and criticized them many times, at this moment, he really hoped that his ancestors and the gods could help him this time, just this time. He was willing to pay any price. Yang Sui respectfully presented the oxtail to the rainstone with both hands. He waved his sleeves. His wide sleeves were a little stiff due to the material, so they weren't as elegant as gauze and ribbons. However, as he waved his hand, the wooden nut bells tied to his sleeves also moved along with his arm, producing a clattering sound. The 9 dancers jumped and twisted their limbs, making the clicking sound more intensive, like the sound of raindrops hitting the ground. The rain-praying dance of the Rain tribe had a feature. That was, they needed to dance with their heads up. For many tribes, it was normal and not unusual to dance with their heads up during the sacrificial dance. However, the Rain tribe was different. In their sacrificial dance, the dancers needed to always look up to the sky. The god of rain they worshipped was naturally in the sky. They had to pray to the god and express the desires of the people of the tribe, hoping to be protected by the god. Of course, they had to look up to the sky with reverence. And Yang Sui also took this opportunity to observe the movement in the sky. Although the wind and sand were flying and he couldn't open his eyes, Yang Sui could still see the changes in the sky. This was his ability that was different from others. He relied on this to speculate the weather. There was no rain. There was no sign of rain at all. Yang Sui gritted his teeth and continued. He knew that he was different from others. This was his pride. Perhaps he could really break the deadlock and do what the ancestors couldn't do? If he worked harder, maybe it would be soon. There was no need for heavy rain. Just 2 drops would be enough. 2 drops would be enough. Gradually, he felt that the power in his body was being drawn away, and he could feel the change of the fire seed. Although there was still no rain in the sky, it was a good thing since the fire seed had changed. The people of the Rain tribe standing below couldn't see the situation on the high platform at all, but some people close to the fire pit felt the change in the fire pit. Hang Mang saw that the fire seed in the fire pit changed from the original red color to light gradually, and the surrounding temperature seemed to be reduced a little. This. An old man rubbed his eyes, and his face was full of disbelief. The muscles on He Chao's face twitched, and he said, in the past, when the shaman prayed for rain, such a situation also happened, but he didn't succeed in the end. An old man on the side glanced at He Chao with sharp eyes, which made He Chao's scalp numb. He wanted to say something, but he had to shut up. Although many people supported them, some people were neutral. These people didn't care who was the shaman. They only cared about whether they could succeed in praying for rain. However, soon as He Chao said, the color of the fire seed changed and the temperature decreased. It began to return to its original state. Those who expected to succeed in praying for rain showed disappointment in their eyes. Yang Sui, who was praying for rain, could feel that his heart was cold even if he couldn't see the change of the fire seed. Even if he had been mentally prepared, he was still very disappointed at this time. It was like after hysterical roaring, he found that the person he wanted to wake up just yawned slowly and continued to sleep. He was unwilling, but it was useless. The dance of praying for rain was almost over. After the fire seed became lighter, it returned to its original color. He Chao's eyes flashed with joy. Looking at the large bundles of firewood not far from the fire pit, he was so excited that his hands trembled a little, and he couldn't wait to laugh out loud. Now, he only hoped that the rain-praying ceremony on the high platform would end quickly. As long as it was over, he could ask people to set up a fire on the high platform. At this moment, at the border of the Rain tribe, Xiao Xian, who stayed in the wooden house, was doubtfully observing a new pattern in the egg-shaped shell in his mind. Xiao Xian had seen the new pattern here. Such a totem was engraved outside the wooden house where they lived. This was the totem of the Rain tribe. Just like the totem of the Drumming tribe, it was far smaller than the totem of the Yanjiao tribe, and it only appeared on the side, near the eggshell. You're tuning in to the Blee Maze Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.